Chapter 1332. On the streets of the ancient city, soldiers blocked the road and chased after the murderers. Ning Chen pulled Xia He and fled in front of nearly 100 soldiers. Other than his martial arts, he did not show any outstanding martial arts. The ancient city was remote and there were very few martial arts masters. Ning Chen and Xia He opened a way out with their fists and feet. The scene of people and horses being thrown off their feet on the streets was shocking. The soldiers in the city were all sent out, but they could not catch the two. The lord of the ancient city was furious and continued to send out troops to stop them. As they approached the city gate, Ning Chen snatched the horse of a general and pulled Xia He onto the back of the horse. Then they rushed toward the city gate. "Close the city gate!" The pursuing soldiers shouted anxiously from behind. Below the city gate, the dozen or so soldiers guarding the gate heard this and immediately pushed the huge gate made of gold and wood, wanting to keep the two of them here. Ning Chen patted the horse's back when they were 100 feet apart. He leaped off the horse and dashed towards the city gate. Below the city gate, half of the soldiers immediately came forward to stop him. However, in a breath's time, the soldiers were scattered. They could not stop Xi Ming. In front of the city gate, Ning Chen arrived. With a leap, he sent two soldiers flying with a kick. The two soldiers flew out and smashed half of the soldiers below the city gate. The city gate, which was gradually closing, stopped. In a few breaths' time, the horse carrying Xia He rushed over. It knocked away the soldiers blocking the way and rushed out of the city gate. "Goodbye!" The moment the horse passed by, Ning Chen grabbed the saddle and jumped onto it. He rode away. Behind them, a large group of soldiers caught up. At this moment, they could only watch the two disappear into the distance. "Report this to the imperial court and issue a warrant for their arrest," the lord of the ancient city said in a deep voice. "Yes." A soldier accepted the order and replied respectfully. Outside the ancient city, the horse galloped toward the east. On the back of the horse, Xi Ming urged the horse forward with Xia He. Under the blazing sun, the two gradually slowed down. Ning Chen got off the horse and led it forward. Xia He looked at the man in front of her and was in a daze. His appearance was so sudden that it was like a violent storm. Her life would change because of it. "Cuckoo!" Xia He's stomach rumbled. It was so clear in the quiet wilderness. Ning Chen stopped and a smile appeared on his face. Xia He blushed and lowered her head. "Let's rest for a while and find something to eat." Ning Chen turned around and said with a smile. On the wasteland, the warhorses stopped and leisurely ate hay. Not far away, a bonfire flickered, dispelling the gradually approaching chill. Xia He sat quietly in front of the bonfire, waiting for Ning Chen to return. About a quarter of an hour later, under the afterglow of the setting sun, a white-clothed figure walked over with large strides. She was holding a hare that had just been caught. Ning Chen sat down in front of the bonfire and began to roast the processed hare. Not long after, an alluring aroma wafted out from the night sky, whetting one's appetite. Ning Chen carefully tore off a piece of roasted rabbit meat and handed it to the girl in front of him. "Thank you," Xia He said in a low voice. She took the rabbit meat and ate it in small bites. Although she came from a poor family, Xia He still behaved appropriately when eating, which was pleasing to the eye. As Ning Chen ate, he looked at the girl in front of him. The smile on his face never disappeared. After waiting for 1,000 years, the joy of regaining what he had lost caused the usually calm knowing destiny to gradually become intoxicated. Opposite him, Xia He's small face was buried lower and lower. It was unknown whether it was because she was shy or because of the light from the bonfire, but her red face was mesmerizing. An hour later, Xia He carefully raised her head and said softly, "I'm full." Ning Chen smiled and moved the bonfire away. He laid down some dried branches and hay and said gently, "This place is too far from the city. I'll have to make do with it for tonight." Xia He gently nodded and obediently stood to the side. "Okay, let's rest." After making the bed, Ning Chen stood up and said to the girl in front of him. Xia He obediently lay down and closed her eyes. Ning Chen sat beside her and added some dry wood to the bonfire, quietly guarding the girl beside him. In the wasteland, the sky was so clear and bright. The sky was filled with stars, so beautiful that it was intoxicating. In the horizon, the cold moon moved west. In front of the bonfire, Xiaohe's breathing gradually stabilized. After running for a day, she was exhausted and fell asleep. At this moment, beside her, Ningchen slowly stood up and walked forward. In the night, a group of men in black ran quickly. Their hands were nimble and didn't look like ordinary people. There's fire in front. It should be them. In front of the group of men in black, a masked man said in a deep voice, "Be careful. That young man is not weak. He might be a Khanate master." You guessed right. However, that was 1,000 years ago. As soon as he finished speaking in the night, a man in plain clothes walked forward. His face was cold and emotionless. The expressions of the black-clothed men froze, and they were on full alert. "Looking at your clothes, you're not from the government. It seems that you're someone's private army," Ningchen said lightly. He looked at the man in the lead and said calmly, "I don't want to kill anyone now. Back off." At the end of his words, coldness flashed in Ningchen's eyes. A terrifying pressure swept out and the night sky changed color. The horrifying scene made the men in black change their expressions and fear rose in their hearts. "Form the formation." In front of the men in black, the masked man said in a deep voice. With that order, a dozen men in black rushed out. Their blades were cold and merciless. Stubborn. The warning was useless. Ningchen's last bit of patience disappeared. He took a step forward. His body was like white lightning, full of killing intent. The real god of death didn't make any unnecessary movements. Every punch and kick brought out a waterfall of blood. The former ruler of the world started killing again today, showing no mercy. In just a few breaths, the dozen men in black all fell into a pool of blood. None of them survived. Ningchen stopped. His black hair danced in the wind. The killing intent around him gradually disappeared. He turned around and left. In front of the bonfire in the distance, Xiaohe, who was sleeping, didn't feel anything. Under the light of the fire, she was beautiful and intoxicating. Soon, Ningchen walked over and sat beside the bonfire. He looked at the woman beside him quietly. The gentleness on his face couldn't be removed. After 1,000 years, she was finally here. In this life, he would stay by her side until they grew old together. A cold wind blew and the bonfire danced, reflecting the two's figures. In that short instant, it felt like 1,000 years. The night slowly passed. The sun rose in the east. In the wilderness, the bonfire was extinguished, leaving only a few pieces of charcoal giving off the last bit of warmth. Xiaohe woke up. A few strands of hair were messy in front of her forehead. Her dazed appearance was less delicate and more innocent. Ningchen smiled gently. He raised his hand and pushed the hair on the girl's forehead behind her ears. Then, he said gently, "Get up and take a walk?" Xiaohe nodded. She got up and looked at the vast wilderness around her. Her mood immediately brightened. Ningchen walked to the side and led the warhorse over. Then he said, "Girl, let's go." The two traveled side by side in the boundless wilderness. When they were tired, they would get on the horse to rest. When they were hungry, Ningchen would find some fruits or wild animals. After one day and one night, the two left the wilderness and arrived in front of a bustling city. The city was very big. Ningchen led Xiaohe in and found an inn to stay in. At the same time, a secret report was sent to the city lord's residence. After reading the report, the city lord of Cloud City looked serious. "Have these two entered the city?" The city lord looked at the old man beside him and asked. "City lord, not long ago, these two entered the city. They are now in the Fortune Inn," the old man said in a deep voice. Although Grand Secretary Li has already resigned, his influence in the imperial court is still there. Now that his grandson has died tragically, he will definitely not let this matter rest. Since these two have come to Cloud City, let's do them a favor. The Cloud City Lord said coldly. "City Lord, please reconsider." The old man said seriously, "There is one thing you need to think about. Minister Li has many men of sacrifice. Logically speaking, these two should not be able to reach Cloud City alive." The city lord's expression turned serious. he said. You mean that young man is a martial arts expert? It is very possible, the old man replied. The city lord's face darkened. He said, if you take action personally, how confident are you? According to my estimation, this young man should be a Xiantian expert. If he cooperates with the soldiers in the city, I have a 60 to 70% chance of success. However, this will cause a lot of chaos, the old man said calmly. The city lord frowned slightly. A Xiantian expert was troublesome. He knew how powerful a Xiantian expert was. Although they were not the top experts in the Great Kong dynasty, they were definitely a big trouble in his cloud city. Then how about we stay put? At this moment, an unfamiliar voice sounded in the city lord's residence. It came without warning and was shocking. In the next moment, the void in front of them stirred. A figure in plain clothes walked out. He looked at them and said lightly, hurry up and decide. That girl may come for me at any time. I don't have much time left. You are? Seeing the young man who suddenly appeared, the old man's expression changed. He immediately stood in front of the city lord. Haven't you been looking for me? Ningchen said calmly, you haven't answered my question yet. Since you all think it's troublesome, then don't make a move. I don't want to cause trouble for myself either. Let's all turn a blind eye to this. Behind the old man, the city lord was about to get angry, but he was stopped by the old man. But the old man said with a serious expression, thank you very much. Ningchen replied indifferently. Then, his figure faded away and he disappeared. After Ningchen left, the old man's trembling body gradually calmed down in the city lord's residence. Why didn't you keep him? The city lord asked in a low voice. City lord! The old man shouted. He turned around and looked at the city lord in front of him. There was still fear in his eyes. He said, we can't interfere in this matter anymore. The city lord was stunned. He seemed to have realized something. You can't stop him? The city lord asked. I don't even have a chance to attack, the old man said bitterly. The city lord trembled. Wasn't he an Xiantian expert? Then what was he? In the Fortune Inn, Xia He finished bathing. She opened the door and walked to the room next door. Knock, knock, knock. After knocking on the door 3 times, Xia He said softly, Mr. Ning, can I come in? Chapter 1333. Cloud City, Fortune Inn. Xia He knocked on the door, waiting for an answer. The room was unusually quiet. No sound came out. After waiting for a few breaths, Xia He put down her hand. Her eyes dimmed as she turned around and walked back to her room. Looking for me? At this moment, a familiar voice came from behind her. Xia He turned around and saw the smiling young man in front of her. She was startled. He wasn't in the room just now? What's wrong? Ningchen smiled. Don't just stand there. Let's talk inside. After speaking, Ningchen pushed open the door and walked into the room. Behind him, Xia He came back to her senses and obediently followed. After entering the room, her expression became a little nervous. Inside the room, Ningchen looked at the girl who had just bathed and smiled. Didn't you want to talk to me? Why aren't you talking? Young Master Ning. Xia He said nervously. When we entered the city just now, I saw our portraits on the wanted posters. I know young master has extraordinary skills, but 2 fists can't fight 4 hands. No matter how strong you are, you can't fight against the government, right? Ningchen smiled. Xia He lowered her head and said softly, Young master, taking me with you all the time is a big burden for you. Ningchen walked forward and flicked the girl's forehead. He smiled and said, You came to find me just to say this? Xia He cried out in pain but didn't dare to resist. She lowered her head and said, Yes. What are you talking about? Ningchen smiled. Don't think too much. I didn't take you with me for nothing. Yes. Xia He raised her head with a puzzled expression. Think about it. Ningchen looked at the lass in front of him and said with a smile, When we're safe, aren't you going to repay our kindness? Then, shouldn't you be doing the laundry and cooking? I only protected you for a few days and earned back a beautiful young lady. Where else can I find such a good thing? Xia He heard this before. She looked at the former with her big eyes and her mind was a little confused. You don't have to worry too much about the wanted posters. The government only cares about it for 3 days. After a few days, no one will care about the wanted posters. Ningchen smiled. Really? Xia He asked softly. Really? Ningchen vowed solemnly. Xia He heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the look of certainty on the former's face. Then we won't go out for the next few days to avoid being recognized. All right. Ningchen nodded and said, we'll leave after this matter blows over. Xia He returned to her room in a relatively good mood. The guilt in her heart had inexplicably lessened. Ningchen looked at the smile on Xia He's face as she left and smiled gently. This girl was much easier to coax than she was 1,000 years ago. For the next 5 days, the two of them stayed in the room and rarely went out. Even their meals were delivered to their rooms by the waiter. Ningchen didn't point it out. Instead, he and Xia He played a game of deceiving each other. Every day, they teased this shy girl, and their mood was surprisingly good. Xia He was naturally shy. Every time she was teased until her face turned red, but she didn't dare to resist. 5 days passed in the blink of an eye. In the city, the arrest warrant was still there, but no one paid any attention to it. Obviously, Ning Chen's warning had taken effect. In the city lord's mansion, the city lord of Cloud City listened to the reports from the spies in Fulai in every day. He was always frightened in his heart, fearing that this master would come to kill him if he was unhappy. After waiting for 5 days, there was no big movement in Fulai Inn. The city lord of Cloud City finally relaxed a little. It seemed that this person wasn't too unreasonable. It was just a pity that he had lost the opportunity to be on good terms with Cabinet Elderly. City Lord, the two of them are leaving. At this time, the old man quickly walked over and said seriously, "Oh." Hearing this, the City Lord of Cloud City's expression turned serious. They finally left. Go send them off. The City Lord of Cloud City said. Yes. The old man accepted the order. On the streets of Cloud City, Ning Chen and Xia He walked side by side, all the way out of the city. Xia He's face was covered with a light veil, covering her beautiful face. In the city, there were many hidden martial arts experts following them along the way. No one dared to act rashly. Under everyone's gaze, the two of them left Cloud City and headed east. On the city wall, the City Lord of Cloud City looked at the two of them leaving with a complicated expression. According to the news from the spies, Cabinet Elderly had personally gone to Great Kong Imperial City to contact his old subordinates. This time, there would be a big shock in the dynasty. This young man's strength was unfathomable. However, he was about to face a powerful Cabinet Elder of Great Kong Imperial City. No one knew if he could survive. Beside the City Lord of Cloud City, the old man looked into the distance with a serious expression. In his life, he had seen too many martial arts experts. However, he couldn't see through this person at all. Perhaps, this person was more terrifying than they thought. Great Kong Imperial City was indeed very powerful. However, there were also existences that couldn't be provoked. He hoped that this person wasn't one of them. On the way, the forces in the light and in the dark began to notice the two of them. After Cabinet Elderly returned to the Imperial City, he immediately used all his forces to search for the two of them. However, no one knew that the person they were going to deal with was the former ruler of the human world, the #1 martial artist in the world for 1,000 years. Along the way, Ning Chen dealt with wave after wave of assassins. None of them could enter Xia He's field of vision. Xia He wasn't a martial artist. He didn't notice anything unusual along the way. Instead, he felt that the journey was too peaceful. It was so peaceful that it was hard to understand. The two of them walked through mountains and rivers, experiencing the local customs of Great Kong Imperial City. Their horizons were greatly broadened. After nearly a year, Xia He gradually walked out of the pain of losing his family. His personality also became much more cheerful. Ning Chen witnessed Xia He's growth little by little. His heart was filled with gratification. Ning Chen. After a certain someone emphasized and corrected him several times, Xia He finally changed the way he addressed Ning Chen. He stood at the top of the mountain and looked at the magnificent scene in the distance. He said excitedly, "Come and see." Ningchen stepped forward and followed the former's gaze. A strange light flashed in his eyes. He said, "That's Great Kong Imperial City. But do you want to go?" Xiaohe thought for a while and nodded. "Then let's go." Ningchen chuckled and agreed. After that, the two of them went down the mountain. Great Kong Imperial City was the center of power for martial artists in the mortal world. Even dragons and tigers had to stay here. They didn't dare to soar. Half a month later, in front of the Grand Peace Royal City, two people walked over. The man was ordinary, and the woman had a veil covering her face, concealing her devastatingly beautiful face. Ningchen led the horse with a smile on his face. He looked harmless. However, the cruel and merciless ruler of the mortal world had killed more than 1,000,000 people. The cycle of reincarnation seemed to have no consciousness, but it was so fair. A knowing destiny cultivator's life was full of disasters. In the end, his foundation and cultivation were destroyed, and he became an ordinary person again. Fortunately, in the last 100 years of his life, he met her. Great Kong Imperial City. The two of them entered. Almost at the same time, all the forces in the Imperial City received a secret report and knew of their arrival. Many pairs of eyes looked at the two people in the Imperial City. They wanted to see why these two young people who offended elderly had the guts to come to Great Kong Imperial City. Was it because they were stupid and ignorant? Or did they really have the confidence? Ningchen felt the gazes from afar, but he didn't care. He walked on the streets of the Imperial City with a gentle expression on his face. In the Great Kong Imperial Palace, the Great Kong Emperor read the secret report from the secret guard. These two people actually came to the Imperial City. He already knew the purpose of Elder Li's return to the capital. His grandson was killed, and his men of sacrifice died one after another. All signs showed that the young man was not easy to deal with. He was probably a disciple of a large sect. However, Elder Li's influence in the imperial court was not small. It shouldn't be a problem for him to deal with a junior. Ting Feng, the Great Kong Emperor said, "Your Majesty." A figure in blue walked out of thin air and said respectfully, "Keep an eye on them. Don't let them make a big deal out of it and affect the civilians in the city," the Great Kong Emperor said calmly. "If necessary, you can take action." "Yes." Reverend Ting Feng accepted the order. His figure faded and disappeared. The two of them walked side by side on the streets of the city. The prosperity of the imperial city was dazzling. In front of a stall selling rouge and face powder, Xiaohe stopped. The emotions in her eyes were hard to hide. Ningchen walked forward and looked at the dazzling array of rouge and face powder on the stall. He picked up a box and handed it to the girl beside him. "Try it." Ningchen smiled. "Young master, you have good taste. This is the best box of face powder. It will definitely suit your wife," a woman behind the stall said with a smile. Xiaohe's face immediately turned red. She was so embarrassed that she almost buried her head in the ground. Ningchen smiled and didn't point it out. He looked at the girl beside him and said, "Try it and see if it's suitable." Xiaohe took the face powder with a red face. She used her finger to gently smear a little on the back of her hand. Then she nodded and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, "It's suitable." "Then I'll take this box." Ningchen looked at the woman and asked, "How much?" "1 tael," the woman said with a smile. Ningchen didn't bargain. He took out 1 tael and handed it to the woman. The woman took the tael. Her delicate face smiled like a blooming flower. On the side, Xiaohe gently tugged at the clothes of the person beside her and whispered, "It's a little expensive." Ningchen didn't mind. He said, "It's okay. Let's go." The two of them walked around the city for half a day. When the sun was about to set, they found an inn and went back to their rooms to rest. It was a simple but fulfilling life. There were no bloody storms, no war fires, no responsibility for the rise and fall of the human race or the peace of the world. All he had was the most ordinary life. Ningchen had taken off all his burdens. For the first time in 1,000 years, he was living like an ordinary person. However, there were always some ignorant people who didn't know what was good for them and disturbed his happy life. As the night deepened, black-clothed figures appeared outside the inn one after another and quickly went upstairs. In the guest room on the second floor, Ning-Chen put down the tea in his hand. The moment more than 10 black-clothed figures went up to the second floor, the surrounding space changed. Chapter 1334. Are you looking for me? On the second floor of the inn, time and space changed. Ning-Chen walked out of the room and looked at the dozen assassins in black. He said calmly, "Your master is really stubborn. After losing so many men of sacrifice, he still refuses to give up." More than 10 assassins in black rushed out with murderous intent. Pitiful. Ning-Chen sighed and waved his right hand. Instantly, in the God-forbidden space, blood spurted out. More than 10 assassins in black fell to the ground. They did not even have the chance to fight back. The men of sacrifice who had been brainwashed no longer had their own subjective judgment. Until death, they did not retreat at all. Ning-Chen walked out of the God-forbidden space and looked outside the inn. Without saying a word, he turned and walked back to his room. Outside the inn, Ting Feng of Dakin Royal City stood quietly in the dark. He looked at the inn in front of him with a serious expression. There was no movement. Could it be that all the men of sacrifice sent by Minister Li were dead? More than 10 innate stage men of sacrifice did not even cause a ripple. The longer he waited, the heavier Ting Feng's mood became. It seemed that they had underestimated this young man. In the west of the royal city, in a luxurious mansion, it was brightly lit. In the mansion, an elder in a long robe waited for a long time. His expression was getting worse and worse. "Master, we failed." At this moment, a figure in black appeared and knelt down to greet him. Upon hearing this, Pavilion Elder Li's face darkened. Another failure? Who exactly is this young man? Why is he so difficult to deal with? Minister Li, although your men of sacrifice are loyal, their cultivation is average. They are not enough to deal with a real martial arts expert. At this moment, a lady in white walked out from the hall behind him with a smile. "Yen Bodhisattva, I invited you here for this matter." Minister Li turned around and looked at the lady in front of him. He said, "With the strength of Bodhi Valley, it should not be a problem to deal with such a young man. Buddha is merciful. This man has killed countless people and has turned into a demon. Bodhi Valley will definitely help you get rid of this demon," Yen Bodhisattva said calmly. "In that case, thank you very much," Minister Li said politely. "Minister Li, please keep your promise," Yen Bodhisattva reminded him. "Of course," Pavilion Elder Li replied. Yen Folding Bodhisattva nodded and did not say anything else. She looked into the distance and a strange look flashed across her beautiful eyes. It was worth it to exchange one person's life for the opportunity to illuminate the world with Buddhism. In the Great Kang Imperial Palace's Holy Palace, a secret report was sent in. After the Great Kang Emperor read it, he directly destroyed it. Bodhi Valley? To think that Pavilion Elder Li would invite them over. He had underestimated this old official. Even in the entire Forgotten River mainland, the Bodhi Valley's power was ranked in the top 5. If the Great Kang Empire did not use its hidden power, it might even be slightly inferior. The Great Kang Emperor pondered for a long time. He looked at the palace in front of him and said, "Continue to keep an eye on them. Report back immediately if there are any movements." In the main hall, the Shadow Guard received the order and disappeared in a flash. Imperial City, Inn. Early in the morning, Ning-Chen walked out of his room and knocked on the door next door. "Big Brother Ning, please come in." In the room, a melodious voice answered. Ning-Chen pushed the door open and entered. He saw the servant girl who was dressing up in the room and said softly, "Xia He, you haven't seen what the Imperial Palace looks like. Let's go outside and take a look today?" When Xia He heard this, she immediately nodded and smiled happily. "Then you dress up first. I'll go downstairs and order something good for you." Ning-Chen said with a smile and went downstairs first. On the first floor, the door of the inn was already open. From time to time, people would pass by in front of the door. From the beginning of the day, the entire Imperial City had started to get busy. Ning-Chen simply ordered some light dishes, then sat there and waited quietly. At this moment, outside the inn, a woman in white walked in. She was beautiful and attracted attention. Ningchen also noticed the person who came. He took a glance and ignored her. It was another old monster like him. No matter how young she looked, she could only deceive mortals. If he guessed correctly, this woman was here to deal with him. Although there were many martial artists in this world, it was obvious that she was here at this time and place. Near the window, Jinyen Bodhisattva glanced at the plain-clothed young man from the corner of her eyes and quickly looked away. She could not feel any movement of true qi at all. Did he have a special Dharma treasure to protect him? Jinyen Bodhisattva picked up a cup of water and thought quietly. Or was this person's cultivation level far above hers? Looking at his age, he did not look like an old monster who could maintain his youthful appearance for 1,000 years. It should be impossible for him to have such a shocking cultivation level. At this moment, on the second floor, Xia He finished dressing and walked downstairs. "Are you hungry? Eat something quickly." Ningchen looked at the girl in front of him and said gently. Xia He sat down and picked up the bowl and chopsticks. She picked up some food for Ningchen and said softly, "Big brother Ning, you eat too." Ningchen smiled and teased, "Our girl knows how to take care of people now." Xia He lowered her head slightly and blushed. "Okay, I won't joke with you anymore. Let's eat first," Ningchen said. "Okay." Xia He nodded and replied softly. In front of the window, Jinyen Bodhisattva noticed the appearance of the woman not far away and a strange look flashed across her eyes. It was rare for a mortal woman to have such an extraordinary temperament and appearance. No wonder this young man did not hesitate to go against the powerful Grand Secretary Li for her. Heroes have a weakness for the charms of beautiful women. Since ancient times, many heroes had their lives ruined because of women. This young man was able to fight his way to the imperial city. There was no doubt about his strength. Unfortunately, he would also walk the same path as those heroes. Ningchen did not care about what Jinyen Bodhisattva was thinking, just like how humans would never care about what cats and dogs thought. In Ningchen's eyes, except for Xia He, everyone in the Great Kang Dynasty was essentially no different from cats and dogs. Xia He ate her food in small bites and occasionally picked up some food for the man beside her. She knew that he was good to her and she liked that he was good to her. Xia He's thoughts were simple. He was good to her and she would repay him with everything she had. Which girl did not yearn for love? In Xia He's eyes, the man beside her was the most powerful hero and no one could replace him. After breakfast, the two of them made some simple preparations and left the inn together. The imperial palace of the Great Kang Dynasty was located in the north of the imperial city. Looking from afar, it was majestic like a celestial palace. As an old monster who had lived for more than 1,000 years, Ningchen did not feel much about it. After all, he had seen a real celestial palace and was no longer surprised by a mortal palace. However, Xia He came from a small city far away and this was her first time seeing the imperial palace. She was still a little shocked. "Do you want to go in and take a look?" In front of the imperial palace, Ningchen looked at the girl beside him and asked. Hearing this, Xia He came back to her senses and said in disbelief, "Can we go in too?" "You can, but you have to wait." Ningchen smiled and said, "Do you want to go in? If you do, I can bring you in." Xia He nodded lightly. "Then wait for me here for 15 minutes. Don't run around," Ningchen reminded her. Xia He replied obediently. Ningchen turned and left. After a few breaths, he disappeared from Xia He's sight. In the Great Kang Dynasty's imperial palace, the emperor of the Great Kang Dynasty sat on the dragon throne and dealt with the affairs of the imperial court. At this moment, in the main hall, spatial ripples appeared without any warning. In the next moment, in the main hall, a plain-clothed figure walked out of thin air. His aura was ordinary and he looked no different from an ordinary person. However, at this moment, the emperor of the Great Kang Dynasty's body froze. Just as he wanted to say something, he forcefully held back. He knew that this person could come here without being noticed by the palace guards and consecrators. This meant that this person's strength was far above everyone in the imperial palace. In the main hall, Ningchen looked at the emperor of the Great Kang Dynasty's reaction and nodded in satisfaction. This emperor of the Great Kang dynasty had a bearing and courage that ordinary people could not compare to. Who are you? In front of the dragon throne, the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty asked. I'm just a commoner. Ningchen said calmly, Your Majesty sent people to watch us for so long. Now that I'm here, Your Majesty doesn't recognize me. You are. Hearing this, the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty was shocked. He stood up and said, It's you. I'm Ningchen. Greetings, Your Majesty. Ningchen cupped his fists and bowed with a smile. Cold sweat broke out on the back of the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty. He sat down again in shock and looked at the man in front of him. He said, Why are you here? Is it because of cabinet elderly? Ningchen chuckled and said, That's a small matter. It's not worth mentioning. I'm here to ask Your Majesty for a favor. Hearing this, the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty was surprised. He said, Please speak. My wife wants to see the imperial palace of the Great Kang dynasty. I know this is a little difficult, so Your Majesty can propose a condition in exchange. As long as it's within my ability, I'll do my best to do it, Ningchen said seriously. The emperor of the Great Kang dynasty was stunned at first, then he came back to his senses. A strange look flashed in his eyes. He said, Any condition? Any condition. Ningchen nodded. The emperor of the Great Kang dynasty's expression turned serious. He got up and walked out of the main hall. Ningchen turned around and looked at the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty in front of him, waiting for the latter's condition. Look at this vast land. The flames of war are endless all year round. Especially my dynasty and the Great Yen dynasty in the north. They have been fighting for hundreds of years. I need a way to completely solve the war. The emperor of the Great Kang dynasty said in a deep voice. As you wish. Ningchen replied calmly. A strange light rose around his body. He took the emperor of the Great Kang dynasty and left the palace. In the north, where the Great Kang dynasty and the Great Yen dynasty met, two figures appeared in the vast wilderness. Ningchen waved his hand. A purple light rose and a peerless divine sword appeared. After hundreds of years, the man and the sword reappeared. With the divine weapon in hand, Ningchen slashed down. Instantly, the land in the vast wilderness shook violently and separated. It was a shocking scene. The border of the two dynasties kept separating. The power of the sword completely changed the appearance of the land. In a distant place, the ocean rolled and quickly poured into the rift valley between the two dynasties. Chapter 1335. At the border of the two dynasties, Ji Ming slashed open the land, and the seawater poured in, completely separating the two neighboring dynasties. In the void, the Great Kang Emperor looked at this scene with a shocked expression. After a long time, the Great Kang Emperor came back to his senses. He looked at the plain-clothed man in front of him, and his heart was in turmoil. Who was this person? This kind of cultivation was not something that a human cultivator could have. In front of him, Ningchen waved his hand and put away his sword. He turned around and said calmly, Is Your Majesty satisfied? The Great Kang Emperor suppressed the waves in his heart and nodded. Yes. Then let's go back. As soon as he said that, the space around the two shook and swallowed their figures. In the Great Kang Imperial Palace and the Divine Temple, it had been less than a quarter of an hour since the two of them returned, but too many things had happened. In the main hall, the Great Kang Emperor looked deeply at the man beside him and said, Men. A servant walked in and bowed respectfully. Your Majesty, go get a gold medal for Mr. Ning. The Great Kang Emperor said seriously. The servant got up and left quickly. Not long after, the servant entered the hall and brought a dragon pattern gold token. Ningchen took the token and bowed politely. Thank you, Your Majesty. After the mission was completed, Ningchen did not stay any longer. He took the dragon pattern gold token and walked out of the palace. Not long after Ningchen left, secret guards appeared in the main hall and bowed their heads to beg for forgiveness. They did not notice that someone had entered the sacred palace. This was a great crime. Get up. The Great Kang Emperor said. This person is not someone you can deal with. In other words, this person's existence was beyond the reach of the entire Great Kang Empire. Outside the palace, after waiting for 15 minutes, Xia He was still waiting quietly without any anxiety on her face. Are you impatient? At this moment, Ning Chen walked over with a smile. Xia He turned around and saw who it was. A bright smile appeared on her face as she said, "No. Let's go, we can go in." Ning Chen waved the dragon pattern gold token in his hand. Xia He nodded her head and followed after him. The two entered the palace. Behind them, a white-clothed figure appeared. Looking at the two in front, a strange expression flashed across her beautiful face. How could the Great Kong Emperor's dragon pattern gold token be in this person's hands? Could this person be a member of the Great Kong Imperial family? In the Great Kong Imperial Palace, the two of them traveled together. Everywhere they went, all the palace maids and eunuchs were sent away first. Even the imperial concubines who were playing in the palace were ordered to leave. In the sacred hall, behind the Great Kong Emperor, the 7 consecrators gathered, their expressions abnormally solemn. To use a sword to split open the border between 2 dynasties, although there aren't many supreme elders who can do this, they do exist. But the most terrifying thing is that we haven't felt any true energy fluctuations from the north. This means that Mr. Ning didn't use his cultivation at all. He only used the strength of his body to create such an astonishing result. The exalted from the imperial family said in a low voice, "In your opinion, who is stronger between this Mr. Ning and that person in the Forgotten River Heavenly Realm?" Emperor De Kong asked in a serious voice. The 7 reverends fell silent when they heard this. The one in the Forgotten River Heavenly Realm is an imperial Dao paragon. This Mr. Ning's strength is indeed unfathomable. However, an imperial Dao sovereign is a supreme powerhouse of this world. Mr. Ning should still be inferior to them. Emperor De Kong nodded and didn't ask any more questions. In the back garden of the imperial palace, flowers bloomed everywhere. It was so beautiful that it was intoxicating. The two walked side by side in the back garden, looking at the most beautiful garden in the mortal world. They were in a good mood. "Do you like it?" Ning Chen asked softly. "I like it." Xia He smiled sweetly and replied. A cool breeze blew, and the sky was filled with flying flowers, like snowflakes, filling the garden. Xia He took 2 steps forward and twirled a few times happily. She smiled and said, "Is it beautiful?" Ning Chen nodded. In the sky full of flying flowers, a beautiful figure with a peerless beauty appeared. Her clothes fluttered, like a fairy descending to the mortal world. Ning Chen looked at the girl in front of him quietly. The smile on his face was so gentle that it couldn't disappear. West of the city, Li residence. Inside the Li residence, Elder Li stood quietly. When he heard the secret report from the spy, his expression was abnormally heavy. Those 2 people entered the imperial palace? What's going on? Why did His Majesty allow them to enter the palace? Yen Bodhisattva, Elder Li said in a low voice. "Elder Li, don't worry." A white-clothed girl walked out from the void and said calmly, "When they leave the palace, I will test them." "Bodhisattva, are you confident?" Elder Li asked seriously. 70%. The white-clothed girl replied. The sun went west. The Kong Imperial Palace. After touring for half a day, Xia He couldn't walk anymore. She temporarily sat down in front of a rockery to rest. Ning Chen sat beside her and looked at the rockery in front of him. He smiled and said, "Girl, do you want to learn martial arts?" Xia He was slightly startled. She shook her head and said, "No. You can live longer and retain your youthful appearance by practicing martial arts. Don't you want to consider it?" Ning Chen said softly. Hearing the words "retain your youthful appearance," Xia He was slightly moved. However, she still shook her head and said, "I don't like it." Ning Chen nodded slightly and didn't ask any more questions. Everyone had their own choice. Since Xia He didn't like it, he didn't want to force her. Since she didn't want to live longer, he wouldn't practice martial arts in this life. After resting for a while, Ning Chen stood up and looked at the girl beside him. He said, "Come girl, I'll carry you." Xia He blushed and said, "No, I can walk on my own. The Imperial Palace is so big. We've already walked a long way. It will take half a day to go back." If you walk on your own, we won't be able to leave today. Ningchen smiled and said, "Come on up." Xiaohe struggled in her heart. She shyly leaned on his back and said softly, "Big brother Ning, if you're tired, put me down." Ningchen nodded. He carried the girl on his back and continued walking. The beautiful scene of a garden full of blooming flowers. Ningchen carried his wife on his back and walked into the distance step by step. In the imperial palace, a strange scene occurred. A plain-clothed young man carried a peerless beauty from the back garden. He passed by the Dekang Sacred Hall and walked out of the palace. In the Sacred Hall, the Dekang Emperor and the 7 imperial consecrators watched this scene. No one came forward to disturb them. "Xiaohe," Ningchen said. "Yes." Xiaohe said with a red face. "How about I carry you for the rest of my life?" Ningchen said softly. "Yes." Xiaohe's eyes were filled with tears as she nodded. Outside the Dekang Imperial Palace, the two of them walked out. On the way back to the inn, a white-clothed girl walked out and threw a shocking palm strike at them. In the distance, Ningchen continued to carry Xiaohe on his back as if he didn't know. As the palm energy approached, the space stirred and swallowed the woman's palm energy. Swoosh! At the same time, a sword appeared in front of Yenja Bodhisattva without any warning. Blood spurted out and covered the sky. Yenja Bodhisattva's arm fell down. Chapter 1336. Outside the Dekang Imperial Palace, Bodhisattva's arm was cut off. The sky was dyed red and red. Bodhisattva was shocked. He could not even feel the pain in his body anymore. The sword was indescribable. There was no beginning and no end. Bodhisattva looked at his right arm that had been cut off. When did he make his move? In Bodhisattva's sight, the silhouette walked away. She did not look back at all. The streets of the imperial city were quiet. Ningchen carried Xiaohe on his back and walked on the street, ignoring the change in the atmosphere. The two of them entered the palace and caused Minister Li's anger and panic. He used all his strength to kill the two of them. The empty street was so quiet that it made one's hair stand on end. Xiaohe walked for half a day and fell asleep on Ningchen's back. Her breathing was steady and her breath smelled like orchids. Ningchen walked very slowly. He did not want to wake the girl on his back. At this moment, hundreds of black figures appeared on the street. They almost filled the entire street. The men of sacrifice from the Li residence came out to kill the two of them. Ningchen walked slowly on the street. His expression was as calm as water. He walked forward as if he did not notice anything. "Kill!" Among the hundreds of men in black, a deep voice ordered. Under the order, the hundreds of men of sacrifice immediately surrounded Ningchen. In an instant, a sword will that had no desire to fight spread out around Ningchen. Under the setting sun, the streets of the imperial city gradually darkened. Wherever the sword went, blood was stained. There were hundreds of men of sacrifice in black. There were even real martial arts masters among them. However, before the absolute sword pressure, all resistance was meaningless. Blood spurted out from Ningchen's chest. Ningchen carried the sleeping Xiaohe on his back. Behind him, there were corpses everywhere. The street was only 1,000 steps away. After 1,000 steps, there was no one left alive. Behind, at the end of the street, Minister Ting Feng saw this shocking scene and was extremely shocked. What was going on? Why could he not see how he attacked? Was the difference between their realms so huge? As night fell, the lights in the imperial city lit up. On the way back to the inn, Ningchen carried Xiaohe on his back across a wooden bridge. Below, a boat sailed past. The sound of zither and flute echoed on the river. The area where the red light was concentrated would become lively at night. Xiaohe was awakened by the sound of zither and flute. She opened her eyes in a daze. "You're awake?" Ningchen asked gently. "Yes," Xiaohe said softly. "Come down and walk by yourself?" Ningchen smiled. "Okay," Xiaohe replied obediently. Ningchen put Xiaohe down and stood on the bridge, looking at the calm surface of the river, not saying a word. Xiaohe stood to the side, quietly admiring the beautiful scenery. She did not disturb them. The bright moon rose and the moonlight shone on the surface of the river, reflecting the bright moonlight. The imperial city, which had been in chaos for an entire day, only gradually quieted down when night fell. Xiaohe. Ningchen turned around and was about to speak when his expression suddenly changed. At the side, Xiaohe's figure collapsed powerlessly. Her fine black hair drifted in the wind and scattered across the bridge. Crack! The scene before his eyes was like the moon in the water. The surface of the river and the sky cracked and shattered with a bang. Ningchen's body trembled as he bent down to help Xiaohe up. The spiritual qi of heaven and earth around him surged and entered Xiaohe's body. One soul is missing. A moment later, Ningchen's face darkened. How could this be? In the next moment, with Ningchen as the center, heaven and earth spirit energy rapidly spread out, permeating every corner of Great Peace Imperial City. All of them are missing a soul. Ningchen's expression gradually became unsightly. His calm heart was finally filled with anger. Humans had 3 souls. Missing a soul usually did not seem abnormal. However, humans had 3 tribulations and 5 calamities. Once the calamity came, those with 3 souls missing would not be able to resist at all. Xiaohe's calamity should have happened during the fire that night. However, his appearance temporarily blocked the calamity for Xiaohe. However, a calamity was a calamity. Xiaohe's calamity would still be on Xiaohe. Who was it that took away everyone's soul? Ningchen closed his eyes and released his consciousness, spreading it endlessly. 10 li, 100 li, 1,000 li. In an instant, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth on vast star of Wang River went berserk, surging violently as if out of control. It was not just Great Peace Imperial City. Ningchen clenched his fists, the killing intent on his body burning brighter and brighter. In an extremely distant place, an unusually strong aura floated up and down. It was as thick as the ocean, far surpassing the cultivators of the mortal realm. Imperial Tao. Ningchen opened his eyes, the coldness in his eyes piercing. On vast star of Wang River, the only person who had the ability to do so was this Imperial Tao sovereign. In the distant earth domain of Wang River heavenly realm, a middle-aged man in a green and white robe opened his eyes. He looked at the mortal realm, a strange light flashing in his eyes. What was the spiritual qi of heaven and earth just now? In Great Kong Royal City, on the Bridge of Helplessness, Ningchen carried the unconscious Xiaohe and rushed into the sky in a flash. Like a blazing meteor, the sword light cut through the night sky, rushing toward vast star of Wang River heavenly realm. 1,000 years of waiting in exchange for a year of peace. Like a broken mirror, the broken dream completely angered knowing destiny. In the sky, the man and the sword became one. The sword light broke through time and space. In a few seconds, it arrived in front of vast star of Wang River heavenly realm. It was a majestic small world with rugged floating islands. Birds chirped and flowers bloomed. It was like a fairyland, beautiful and extraordinary. At this moment, in the sky above vast star of Wang River heavenly realm, a sword broke through the sky. The sword light scattered and Ningchen walked out. The incomparably powerful sword pressure roared and surged. In the heavenly realm, all the martial arts experts were shocked and looked toward the sky. In the center of the heavenly realm, Heaven Lord of Wang River, who was dressed in a green and white robe, frowned slightly and looked displeased. In the sky, Ningchen looked at the middle-aged man below and said in a low voice, "Where are their souls?" Heaven Lord of Wang River narrowed his eyes and said, "I don't know what you are talking about. However, you have barged into the heavenly realm. Shouldn't you give me an explanation? I will ask one last time. Where are their souls?" Ningchen said coldly, "I don't know." Heaven Lord of Wang River sneered. Ningchen's expression turned completely cold. The sword pressure around him surged and became heavier. Such a sword? Heaven Lord of Wang River's expression turned serious. The sovereign Tao origin in his body surged as he prepared to fight. "Raise your sword." After 1,000 years of waiting, the dream was shattered. Ningchen was unable to suppress his anger. With a raise of his sword, the 9 heavens sword cry shook the heavens. The shocking sword pressure caused the entire vast star of Wang River heavenly realm to rumble and shake. The heavens collapsed and the earth cracked. In an instant, streaks of sword light shot into the sky from all directions. The beginning of the sword was a murderous intent. The sky was filled with swords that rushed from the mortal world to the sky. They were endless and directly slashed open the vast star of Wang River, destroying the sacred land of Wang River that had existed for 1,000 years. In the sky, billions of sword light turned into a sword cloud. The sound of swords rang out and shook everyone's heart. Under the sword cloud, the silhouette in plain clothes and black hair danced wildly. Under the gazes of the kings, it turned into a dazzling white color. Among the kings, someone was shocked. He finally remembered the immortal legend that had been passed down in the mortal world 900 years ago. The heavens did not bless the human race. Knowing destiny, he fought with the heavens. The legend that once shook the world had personally come to Wang River. The ruler of the mortal world, the great Xia Jiming Marquis. Chapter 1337. In the forgetful river heavenly realm, knowing destiny came to punish Qin Xiaobei. He raised his sword, and billions of sword lights soared into the sky. It was a shocking scene. Under the sword clouds that covered the sky and the moon, a white-haired figure in plain clothes stood in the air. His murderous aura was monstrous, frightening even gods and ghosts. The forgetful river heavenly realm was destroyed by the billions of sword lights. Rubble flew everywhere, and a powerful fourth realm cultivator stood on every piece of rubble. The strongest of them had already reached the king realm. "You've gone too far." In the void, Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful looked at the small world that was collapsing. His expression darkened, and he soared into the sky. An Emperor Dao Paragon appeared personally. His body was surrounded by dazzling golden light, and his heavy palm struck toward knowing destiny. Boom! The former master of the human realm and the current Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful fought for the first time. Sword and palm clashed. Of the two, one had returned to his mortal body, while the other was in his prime. When the supreme experts of different eras fought, the difference between them was like heaven and earth. The human sword rose, and purple divine light cut through time and space. The Emperor Dao was boundless, but it could not block the human sword's sharpness. Blood dyed the sky red. Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful groaned and took several steps back. The absolute difference in strength could not be crossed. 900 years ago and 900 years later, the strength of knowing destiny had never changed. The sword that surpassed the boundaries of the human realm formed its own Dao among the 3,000 great Daos. Wherever the sword went, there was nothing it could not destroy. Who exactly are you? 10 steps away, Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful stabilized his body and looked at the white-haired young man in front of him with a shocked expression. Ningchen did not say anything more. His figure flashed and he charged forward. With a rumble, the human sword slashed the sky. An earth-shattering sword slashed through the night sky and descended from the sky. Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful's pupils constricted, and he clasped his hands together to block the attack. Extreme Dao and Emperor Dao clashed violently. Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful felt a huge force in his arms, and his body fell rapidly. In the void, the falling Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful smashed boulder after boulder. He barely managed to stop his body several thousand feet away. In the sky, the white-haired figure disappeared and instantly appeared in front of Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful. The human sword slashed down, and the sword might was vast and mighty. Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetful River was once again sent. The absolute way of the sword was invincible in the world. Even though he had lost all his cultivation, he was still far more powerful than all the supreme cultivators on the imperial path. After 900 years of silence, other than those who had participated in the first Demon Slayer campaign, there were very few people in the world who could recognize the appearance of knowing destiny. The Heavenly Lord of the River of Forgetfulness was no exception. However, even though they were no longer acquaintances, the Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness could vaguely guess the identity of the newcomer. There was only one person in the world who had such a high level of sword cultivation. The former ruler of the human world, the Marquis of Jiming. Boom! Before he could finish his thoughts, the sword light came at him again. The continuous attacks did not leave him any time to catch his breath. Heaven Lord River of Forgetfulness took a few more steps back as blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Ha! Unwilling to lose just like that, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness let out a deep roar. Golden light shot up into the sky from his body. His supreme imperial might shook the entire vast star of forgetfulness. An Emperor Dao sovereign should have been an invincible expert of an era, but now he was being forcefully suppressed by someone else. The heavenly master of the River of Forgetfulness was infuriated. His Emperor Dao origin energy soared rapidly, wanting to turn the tables around. Seeing this, Ning Chen's expression did not change at all. He took a step forward and disappeared once more. Ning Chen was the only person in the world who could control the Yellow Springs and Time Divine Forbidden Zones at the same time. He could control the laws of space and time, and his battle prowess multiplied. Every time Su Yi appeared, she would appear at the most difficult point to defend against. The momentum of her sword was like thunder, incomparably swift and fierce. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Around Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness, huge boulders were crushed into dust by the shock waves of the battle. Strong, 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 so strong that words could not describe it. The strongest person in the world once again displayed his shocking battle prowess. Blood spurted out from the corner of Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's mouth again and again. The Emperor Dao origin energy around him was constantly attacked by the sword Qi and was riddled with holes. Even an Emperor Dao sovereign would not be able to resist such an unstoppable sword. His injuries accumulated, and he gradually reached his limit. What are you all still standing there for? Hurry up and attack. Forced to his limit, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's gaze swept across the crowd outside the battle and bellowed. With the Imperial Order, all the Fourth Realm experts on the boulders outside the battle exchanged glances. They forcefully suppressed the shock and fear in their hearts and charged into the battle. Aiding the evildoer is punishable by death. In the void, Ning Chen said coldly. He and his sword turned, and his sword soared into the sky. An instant later, sword clouds stirred in the sky. Endless sword pressure spread out, and heaven and earth changed color. Boom! Lightning flashed in the sword clouds. An instant later, billions of sword edges rushed down from the sky like a sword rain, descending on the world. The most terrifying scene was that all the Fourth Realm experts in the River of Forgetfulness were shocked. They channeled all their strength to resist the sword tribulation descending from the sky. The next moment, the sword rain descended. In the battle, miserable screams rang out. The Fourth Realm experts who had once ruled the world were now like candles in the wind. Even their lives were not in their control. In the center of the battle, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's heart was in turmoil. He could not believe the scene before him. The difference in absolute strength was difficult to make up for, and it made him despair. Your blood is sinful and does not deserve to fall into the world. In the void, Ning Chen said coldly. Sword light flashed past, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged. The blood of all the Fourth Realm experts rapidly condensed, forming a blood island that floated between heaven and earth. You're the only one left. Ning Chen looked over at Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness and said coldly, Today, you have no way out. With that, Ning Chen's figure flashed out again. With his extremely fast speed and incomparably powerful combat strength, he was like a god of death. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness was shocked. He hurriedly channeled his life-saving technique. He raised his hand, and an unprecedented power surged out. Ning Chen sensed it. He turned around, and in an instant he was hundreds of miles away. In the void in front of him, heaven and earth rumbled. The void was swallowed by an inexplicable power. It was like a black swamp that kept spreading. It was an unusual move that he had never seen before. Ning Chen's expression turned serious. He swung his sword and scattered the power that kept swallowing him. Ha! Seeing Ning Chen dodge, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's fearful heart was slightly relieved. He shouted, and the black air around him stirred. It was turbid and cold. Ning Chen narrowed his eyes. This power was not sovereign Tao laws, nor was it like any kind of power in the world. It was more like the power of gods and demons. Unable to confirm his suspicions, Ningchen no longer hesitated. He took a step forward and rushed forward. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness snorted and also rushed forward. The black air surged, corroding heaven and earth. Ningchen's figure rushed into the black air. The surrounding spiritual energy protected him, forcibly resisting the unfamiliar power. A strong corrosive sound rang out. The spiritual energy around Ningchen quickly dissipated, unable to block the corrosion of the black air. You have fallen to such a state. As an sovereign, you are truly a disgrace to the human race. Feeling the dark and bloody power in the black air, Ningchen's heart burned with anger. He activated the divine restriction and forcibly separated the power of gods and demons. The divine restriction appeared, and the power of gods and demons could not enter. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness was shocked and in disbelief. Swish! In 3 steps, Ningchen swung his sword, and the black air dissipated. Blood fell like rain. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness groaned and took a few more steps back. Blood flowed out of his chest, dyeing his robe red. Fear rose on Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's face. For the first time in 1,000 years, he felt death so close. Swish! Without giving him time to breathe, the sword light slashed down again. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's left arm flew off. Blood spurted out, blurring his vision. You! Intense pain assaulted his body. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness was shocked and angry. He did not dare to continue fighting and turned to flee. On the battlefield, an injury on the back of a warrior is a disgrace. You have disgraced the name of the strong. Ningchen swung his sword, and the sword light broke through space and time, slashing toward the fleeing Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness. Swish! The sword light slashed across, and a terrifying sword wound appeared on Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's back. The wound was so deep that his dragon bone could be seen. The bone-deep pain made Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's face contort, and he almost fainted. However, his survival instinct supported him, and his figure continued to rush forward. 50 miles, 500 miles. As blood flowed out, his consciousness gradually blurred. Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness had already forgotten how far he had fled. He could only run forward mechanically. The surroundings gradually changed. Snow and ice fell, and it was extremely cold. This is... Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness stopped and looked around. Confusion flashed in his eyes. Could it be that he had reached the extreme north? He had finally escaped that person's pursuit. Not escaping? At this moment, spatial ripples appeared in the void. A white-haired figure dressed in plain clothes walked out. The sword slashed across, and the sword slit his throat. Ugh! Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's pupils constricted. Before death, his body trembled violently. Ningchen stepped forward and grabbed the former's throat, which was constantly spurting out blood. He said with killing intent, "Speak, where are their souls?" Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's eyes flashed with hatred. He said hoarsely, "You will never be able to save them." Ningchen used 30% more strength with his left hand and crushed 50% of the former's throat. He said coldly, "There is a technique in this world called the soul-searching technique. Why do you think I left your soul alive?" Hearing the words soul-searching technique, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's body trembled. Fear clearly flashed in his eyes. The soul-searching technique was a forbidden technique. It could search a person until they became an idiot. The person whose soul was searched could be said to be unable to succeed or die. It was extremely painful. However, a moment later, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's trembling body gradually calmed down. He said weakly, "Crepe Myrtle Realm Master, you are the ruler of the mortal world. How could you cultivate this technique? If you really know this technique, you don't have to waste your breath talking to me. You won't cry until you see the coffin." Ningchen lost his last bit of patience. His left hand exerted force and crushed the former's throat. With his physical body destroyed, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's soul immediately escaped from his body, wanting to escape. Can you escape? Ningchen raised his hand and clenched the void. Time and space around him stopped, forming a cage that locked Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's soul. In the cage, Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's soul struggled violently, but it could not break free from the shackles of time and space. I will make you spit out everything you have done, Ningchen said coldly as he waved his hand and captured Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness's soul. Just as Heaven Master of the River of Forgetfulness died, at the border of the River of Forgetfulness, a pair of cold eyes opened and looked into the distance. Chapter 1338. A white-clothed figure stood in the air above the River of Forgetfulness. Heaven and earth spirit energy surged in front of her as flames soared and refined the soul of Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness. In the sea of flames, shrill screams rang out, unable to endure the burning of the heavenly fire. Speak, where are the souls of these people? In front of the sea of fire, Ningchen looked at Heavenly Lord River of Forgetfulness who was inside the heavenly fire and said coldly, "You can't save them." Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness screamed from within the sea of flames. Stubborn. Ningchen's eyes flashed coldly. He raised his right hand, and heaven and earth spirit energy surged into the sea of flames, bolstering the might of the heavenly fire. In an instant, the sea of flames surged, its might rising by several times. Arg! Shrill screams resounded through the sky. Within the sea of flames, Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness's soul grew weaker and weaker, showing signs of dissipating at any moment. However, every time Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness's soul was about to dissipate, an abnormally powerful energy would suppress it and prevent it from dissipating. Recovery and destruction, the cycle of reincarnation. In the sea of flames, Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness grew more and more afraid of this endless cycle of pain. In front, Ningchen coldly looked at the struggling Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness without any pity in his heart. 1 day, 2 days, one day after another passed. Within the heavenly fire, the Heaven Lord of the River of Forgetfulness's soul was on the verge of collapse. The agony of being unable to die tormented this former sovereign of the Emperor Dao. Ningchen quietly stood in front of the sea of flames, not asking any more questions. He just continued to torture Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness day after day. In the air, the shrill screams made one tremble in fear. If not for the fact that the truth was right in front of them, no one would believe that an Emperor Dao sovereign would be reduced to such a state. 10 days later, in the sea of flames, the screams gradually weakened. Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness's soul was still writhing in pain, but he was so weak that he could no longer scream. Ningchen quietly looked ahead. After a long time, he walked toward the sea of flames. The flames parted as if they had a mind of their own, not harming heaven-knowing destiny at all. Within the sea of flames, Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness's body trembled again and again. His soul was on the verge of being extinguished, but the heaven and earth spirit energy rapidly restored it, maintaining its last shred of life. How is it? Can you still hold on? Ningchen calmly looked at Heaven Lord of Forgetfulness. You demon! Heaven Lord River of Forgetfulness's face contorted, unable to conceal his fear as he shouted hoarsely. Compared to what you've done, I don't deserve such an evaluation. Ningchen replied in a cold voice. He raised his right hand and a violent surge of heaven and earth spiritual qi surged out, suppressing the former. As the spiritual energy entered his body, Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness's soul power rapidly recovered. However, at this moment, Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness did not feel joy. Instead, he felt a deep sense of fear. All right, let's continue. After helping the Heavenly Lord of the River of Forgetfulness recover his soul energy, Ningchen said indifferently before turning around and walking out of the sea of fire. When Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness heard this, his eyes shook and his soul trembled uncontrollably. I'll talk. Driven by fear, Heaven Lord River of Forgetfulness could no longer hold on, his voice trembling. Ningchen stopped, turned around and said calmly, Tell me, where are their souls? Their souls. Before he could even finish speaking, a gigantic figure appeared on planet Forgetful River. It towered over the starry sky and punched out. The violent power was unstoppable. It broke through the obstruction of the laws on the vast forgotten river and descended upon the mortal realm. "It's here, finally," Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness laughed heartily. However, his laughter came to an abrupt end. The power of a god-fiend descended upon the mortal realm, breaking through the restrictions of space and directly descending upon Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness's soul. In the next moment, a violent explosion resounded in the sea of fire. The god-fiend power destroyed Heaven Master River of Forgetfulness's soul. Raging waves swept out in all directions. In front of the sea of fire, Ning Chen was enraged. He looked up at the horizon, then took a step forward and soared into the sky. In the starry sky, the gigantic god-fiend raised its hand and slapped down once more. "Killing to silence, what are you trying to hide?" Ning Chen swung his sword, and sword chi surged for 30,000 miles to meet the god-fiend's hand. The ancient god-fiend and the #1 martial artist of the current era officially clashed. In the starry sky, sword chi and the god-fiend power collided. Shocking shockwaves shook the starry sky within 100,000 miles. Now that the god-fiend had appeared in the mortal realm, Ning Chen did not dare to be careless. With a deep roar, sword chi rose around him. Endless sword chi gathered from all directions. It was incomparably powerful. In front of him, the gigantic god-fiend stood in the void. Its gigantic body had bronze skin, and its explosive muscles were perfectly streamlined. It was a natural god of war, born with unbelievable combat strength. The heavenly Tao was unfair. Some people were born to know this, and some were born to be gods. In the starry sky, the god-fiend's face was cold as it looked at the tiny human man in front of it with disdain. As a god-fiend, most of them had a discriminatory mentality toward humans. There were few exceptions. It was not that the god-fiend was arrogant, but it was their nature. Just like how humans were superior to beasts, they were born with a sense of superiority. The strong were respected. No matter when, where, or what race, this was an unchanging truth. After 1,000 years, Ning Chen understood human nature better than anyone else. Thus, he did not waver in the slightest in the face of the god-fiend's disdain. In a world where the strong were respected, the weak could only be eliminated. Sword technique. Man and sword swung, and purple sword light spread for hundreds of thousands of miles. Ning Chen kept increasing his combat strength, fighting with the god-fiend in front of him with all his strength. The god-fiend raised its hand, and black chi spread out. The purple sword light collapsed, and the specks of starlight were quickly devoured by the black chi. Seeing this familiar scene, Ning Chen's expression immediately sank. It turned out that Heaven Lord River of Forgetfulness's power came from this god-fiend. There was no such thing as a free gift in the world. What did Heaven Lord River of Forgetfulness use to exchange for the god-fiend's power? Ning Chen did not dare to think too much about the ugliness. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and the sword pressure around him grew stronger and stronger. A dazzling brilliance illuminated the dim mortal realm. Ha! With an earth-shattering roar, Ning Chen's white hair danced wildly. The spiritual chi of heaven and earth gathered around him, turning into 8 giant dragons that coiled in the starry sky. The divergent yellow secret technique appeared again, and the sword chi filled the sky as he fought against the god-fiend. Boom! After a brief exchange, Su Yi's figure disappeared from the starry sky. When she reappeared, she was already in front of the god-fiend. The sword light slashed down, and streaks of sword chi swept over, turning into a sword waterfall that pressed down on the god-fiend. The horrifying sword pressure was unprecedented. For the first time in 900 years, knowing destiny attacked with all his strength, and the might of the god-fiend from back then was reproduced. As the sword waterfall pressed down, the god-fiend crossed his arms, and black chi covered his body, blocking the attacks one after another. The strongest martial artist in the mortal realm and the never-before-seen god-fiend clashed, and the starry sky dimmed. Boom, boom, boom. The intense impact shook the starry sky. The black chi in front of the god-fiend quickly dissipated, but it still blocked knowing destiny's attacks. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed, and he stepped out, disappearing. The god fiend frowned, and he released his divine sense to search for the human martial artist. In the god-forbidden space, Ning Chen's figure appeared. He looked at the god fiend in front of him, and coldness flashed in his eyes. This god fiend's power had already surpassed the first Kunyi demon emperor. It was not the difference in cultivation level, but the essence of power. The god fiend's power was almost equivalent to the laws of heaven and earth. It was too much of a suppression for ordinary martial artists. In the starry sky, the god fiend scanned the surrounding starry sky, and his frown deepened. He had underestimated this human. In the god-forbidden space, Ning Chen held his sword horizontally with his left hand. In an instant, his sword was raised to the extreme, and a dazzling sword light shot into the sky, piercing through millions of miles of starry sky. Nirvana! Nirvana reappeared, and the sword aura was extremely powerful. The god fiend felt it, and before he could activate his power, thousands of sword waterfalls had already arrived. The magnificent sword chi crisscrossed endlessly, and the god fiend could not activate his power in time. With a deep roar, the god fiend's power gathered around him to strengthen his body, and he blocked the incoming attacks. Boom! After a shockingly intense collision, the god fiend's body was splashed with red, and he took half a step back. The god fiend was injured, and it was unprecedented. The human's blasphemy had completely triggered the god fiend's anger. With a furious roar, the god fiend's body shrunk rapidly, and he became about the same height as an ordinary human. His bronze skin shone brightly under the starry sky, and his power surged, shocking people. "You have made me angry." The god fiend spoke for the first time. He took a step forward, and the starry sky beneath him collapsed. A terrifying existence that could not be tolerated by heaven and earth. After gathering his power and turning into a human form, the pressure he gave off was even stronger than before. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the god fiend's body was already in front of him. Ning Chen's pupils constricted, and he instinctively placed his sword in front of him. A violent collision sounded, and Ning Chen's body flew out for 100 miles, smashing through one boulder after another. 100 miles away, Ning Chen forced himself to stop, and the barrier formed by the spiritual chi of heaven and earth dissipated, barely blocking the god fiend's attack. Seeing this, the god fiend squinted his eyes, and without hesitation, he dashed out again. Ning Chen's expression turned cold, and he did not retreat. His body flashed, and he faced the god fiend head-on. Boom! The fist and the sword clashed. The power of the god fiend and the power of the sword wei clashed with each other, and the starry sky around Ning Chen was destroyed, unable to withstand the power that surpassed the limits of the human world. With your power, you can already ascend to the god fiend, but you are willing to stay in this filthy human world. What are you scheming? In the battle, the god fiend asked coldly, and his attacks became fiercer, and he did not hold back at all. It is not up to you to comment on the human world. Ning Chen waved his sword to block the god fiend's fist. His left hand clenched and a cold chill spread out. It was the first time the demon sword had appeared since it was forged. Both swords moved heaven and earth and yin and yang. Ning Chen's sword shook off the opponent in front of him. The two swords crossed, and the sword radiance shot into the sky. The god fiend focused, and a black aura surged around him. He gathered all his power, and he did not dare to be careless. Emperor's sword, divine punishment. Ning Chen spoke, and his eyes shone brightly. The sword radiance of the two divine weapons crossed, and they slashed toward the human world. As the killing move arrived, the god fiend roared angrily, and his palm held up the sky. The strongest power faced the strongest sword in the human world. Boom! The most intense collision sounded. The god fiend and the sword wei clashed with each other, and the laws of heaven and earth were quickly destroyed. Even the starlight could not escape. The aftershock caused the god fiend to slide 10 steps back, and after 10 steps, he forcefully stabilized himself. In front of him, Ning Chen walked out from the raging waves, and his figure disappeared again. Chapter 1339. In the forgetful river Starfield, the battle between humans and gods had reached its climax. In front of the god and demon, knowing Destiny's combat power had reached its peak. After 900 years, knowing Destiny's sword was even sharper than before. Humans and gods were originally incomparable existences. Today, humans defied the heavens and fought the ancient god and demon head-on. After 100 moves, the god and demon were dyed red. The dual swords of humans and demons appeared in the human world. Fast, fast, fast. Ning Chen's figure flashed continuously with the support of the divine restriction. In the space node, the two swords crossed, each faster than the previous. In the starfield, the god and demon's black aura swirled. Their powerful bodies resisted the peerless divine weapons head-on. The rumbling sound echoed through the starfield. Humans and gods fought to the extreme. Terrifying waves swept across 1,000,000 miles. In an hour's time, the two had shattered one star after another. They were getting further and further away from the Forgetful River starfield. In the vast Forgetful River starfield, stars were everywhere. The two figures crossed each other and exchanged moves. Stars exploded one after another. There were swords in the mortal world and gods in the heavens. The two ultimate existences in the world fought, changing the color of the starfield. Strong, unquestionably strong. The ancient god and demon in human form gathered their strength. Every punch and kick had the power to shatter stars. On the other hand, although Ning Chen's cultivation had dissipated, he relied on his unparalleled sword skills and 8 dragons to fight the ancient god head-on. He was not at a disadvantage. Sword technique returned to 1. Ning Chen's sword had reached its limit and returned to its original state. He waved his sword and slashed apart the stars with absolute sword pressure. In front of him, the god and demon stepped forward and roared. They grabbed 2 stars with both hands and threw them out. With the power to cut the heavens and capture the stars, the evenly matched battle between humans and gods gradually evolved into a battle of 1,000 days. No one could suppress the other in a short time. After hundreds of moves, the ancient god and demon's body was covered in blood many times. However, the god and demon's body was indestructible. Their injuries recovered quickly, shocking the world. Seeing this, Ning Chen's attacks became fiercer and fiercer. Every move was merciless and deadly. The first person in the human world who had cultivated his sword for 900 years. His sword skills could be said to be unprecedented. Even the ancient god and demon did not dare to be careless. Emperor's sword, 3,000 red dust. After 1,000 moves, the sword in Ning Chen's hand soared into the sky. A shocking sword pressure spread out, and the 3,000 red dust spread out. It was impossible to see through it. The sword became one, and the rules were self-determined. In the mortal realm, Ning Chen stood in the air. He was the emperor of the sword, controlling all living things. Within the sword domain, the primordial god fiend's expression turned serious. He crossed his hands and let out a deep roar as his god fiend energy surged out violently. Limitless hell. With such a powerful enemy in front of him, the ancient god and demon no longer held back. Their divine abilities appeared, and immediately, a sinister ghost hell appeared in the starry space and rapidly spread out. The 3,000 mortal worlds and limitless hell collided with each other, and an astonishing vibration resounded throughout the battlefield. All the large stars that were affected by the power of the 2 small worlds were turned into dust and completely disappeared. It was beyond the limits of what the mortal world could bear. It could be said to be a world-shaking battle between gods. They fought until the sky turned dark and the earth turned dark, as if the end of the world had come. In the star field, on the true martial star and the Forgetful River, the last 2 great life stars, all the warriors felt a pressure that penetrated deep into their souls. They were terrified. God! In the distant star fields, several emperors in the mortal world also felt the astonishing power in the distance. Their expressions darkened as they murmured. This power had already surpassed the emperors. It was even more terrifying than the battle between the Crepe Myrtle Region Lord and the Celestial Demon Lord. Other than gods, there couldn't be such a level of power in the world. In the Crepe Myrtle Divine Region, Honorable Gu Yao, who had already attained the Emperor's path, stood on the peak and looked at the forgetful river star field in the distance. His eyes narrowed. Among the two forces, one of them was the Region Lord. Who was the other one? Was there someone in the world who could fight with the Region Lord to such an extent? Everyone was watching. In the forgetful river star field, the battle between humans and gods had been going on for a few days. In the depths of the star field, rubble floated, and it was a scene of devastation. Many sword wounds were clearly visible on the primordial god fiend's body. His shirt was destroyed, revealing his bronze skin that was full of terrifying explosive power. However, although the sword wounds seemed serious, they had all healed. Only the sword scars had not disappeared. The god fiend's body was terrifying. It was immortal and indestructible, and it was difficult for sword and blade to injure it. In front of him, Ningchen held two swords with both hands. The human and demon swords hummed together, and the sound was earth-shattering. After several days of battle, Ningchen's expression was still as calm as autumn water. His white clothes were spotless and abnormally clean. Although he hadn't won the battle yet, there was no doubt that the human was suppressing the god. "Human, your name." The primordial god fiend spoke with a serious expression. Such an opponent was worthy of being remembered. "Knowing destiny." Ningchen replied calmly. He took a step forward and flashed forward. The primordial god fiend stepped forward and punched out. Black chi surged and collided with the peerless divine weapon. It was a pure competition of strength. Amidst the rumbling, a large spatial crack appeared between the two of them and spread thousands of miles away. Within the crack, spatial turbulence swept out and swallowed the two of them. However, how could the spatial turbulence affect a human and a god that had surpassed the limits of the human world? In the spatial turbulence, the two of them exchanged punches and kicks. It seemed ordinary, but every move was deadly. The sword cut through the primordial god fiend's skin. Blood splattered from the left arm of the primordial god fiend. Black chi immediately gathered and healed the wound. After being injured again and again, the primordial god fiend's expression became colder and colder. Flames danced in his eyes as he looked for an opportunity to counterattack. Although the human before him was strong, it was only limited to the sword Dao. His physical body and cultivation were both inferior. If he could find an opportunity, he would definitely be able to kill the human in one strike. Ningchen understood the balance between the primordial god fiend and attacked continuously. He didn't give the primordial god fiend any chance. He didn't believe that there was an absolute immortal body in the world. As long as the injury was serious enough, even the primordial god fiend couldn't recover quickly. In the god-slaying battle, he couldn't be careless. Ningchen pushed the power of the divine restriction to the limit. His figure disappeared again and again, severely injuring the primordial god fiend. Ugh! After 3,000 moves, Ningchen broke through the black chi around the primordial god fiend and stabbed his sword into the latter's left shoulder. Blood splattered 3 inches above the primordial god fiend's heart. The primordial god fiend groaned and retreated several steps. Ningchen's human sword once again slashed towards Yi Futian, mercilessly threatening him. Clang! The primordial god fiend raised his hand to block the sword. The sound of metal clashing resounded. The sword was blocked and couldn't advance any further. Invisible sword. In front of the primordial god fiend, Ningchen shouted softly. The demonic sword in his left hand spun rapidly and pierced into the primordial god fiend's body inch by inch. Blood flowed and dyed the primordial god fiend's body red. The primordial god fiend grunted again. He held the two swords with both hands and forcefully pulled them out. "It's been 10,000 years. You're the first person to injure me to this extent." Killing intent surged in the primordial god fiend's eyes. The black chi around him exploded and shook off the battle. 100 steps away, Ningchen stopped in front of him. The heaven and earth spiritual chi around him surged and blocked the primordial god fiend's attack. It was a flawless attack and defense. When a human's realm surpassed that of a god, even the primordial god fiend couldn't underestimate a human. Humans have their human realm and gods have their divine domain. You shouldn't have crossed the line. Ningchen looked at the primordial god fiend in front of him and said in a deep voice, are the souls of the mortals on the Forgotten River in your hands. The Forgotten River Master had the power of the primordial god-fiend. In this world there was no free gift. The Forgotten River Master must have paid a high price. Those human souls? So what? If you want them back, you'll have to defeat me, the primordial god-fiend replied coldly. So it's you. Hearing the primordial god-fiend admit it, Ning Chen's expression turned completely cold. With a deep roar, the 8 dragons went against the flow. Violent heaven and earth spiritual chi flowed into his body continuously. Feeling the rapidly rising pressure around the human in front of him, the primordial god-fiend's expression turned serious. Was this person not afraid of his body exploding? In the starry sky, the 8 dragons entered his body. Endless heaven and earth spiritual chi filled his body. Ning Chen's aura rose rapidly and returned to its peak. The demon sword disappeared and was replaced by a golden book. The heavenly book of creation had reappeared in the world after 900 years. This is? In front of him, the primordial god-fiend's expression darkened. Heavenly book? Not good. Someone in the human realm had cultivated 10 heavenly books. With the heavenly book of creation's support, Ning Chen's body shone brilliantly. The strongest martial art in the human realm reappeared. Heavenly book. The heavenly book flipped, one book after another. The heavenly book revealed its power. Instantly, large stars from all over the Forgotten River starfield rushed over and crashed into the primordial god-fiend. The primordial god-fiend narrowed his eyes and looked at the large stars that were coming from all directions. He opened his palms and a black storm surged out. The rumbling shook the starry sky. The primordial god-fiend shook the stars. After a few breaths of time, the large stars exploded. The terrifying impact rippled out rapidly and the light was extremely bright. It was like a huge firework that lit up the entire Forgotten River starfield. In the distance, the heavenly book in Ning Chen's hand had flipped to the earth book. He looked at the figure in the center of the explosion and did not let his guard down. This primordial god-fiend was too powerful. If he could not get rid of it this time, after 100 years, when his lifespan was exhausted, no one in the human realm would be able to fight against this demon. In the center of the explosion, the aftermath dissipated. The primordial god-fiend stepped out. His naked upper body was stained with blood, but there were no fatal injuries. Ning Chen was not too surprised. If this primordial god-fiend could be killed so easily, then the name of the primordial god-fiend would be a joke. You are indeed the strongest opponent I have ever met. However, this is not enough to kill me. The primordial god-fiend said coldly. A black aura spread around his body and quickly healed his injuries. Restrictive spell. With a soft whisper, the primordial god-fiend's eyes were filled with murderous intent. In an instant, the entire starfield darkened and the Forgotten River starfield started to collapse from the center. Seeing this, Ning Chen's expression turned serious. Was the victor going to be decided? 4 celestial slaying swords. At the end of the battle, the 4 celestial slaying swords reappeared in the human realm. Amidst the thunder and lightning, 4 unparalleled celestial instruments descended. The 4 celestial slaying swords descended and circled around knowing destiny. Thunderbolts fell from the sky one after another. It was the fear of the heavens and it was the punishment of the heavens. Not copper, not iron, not steel, it was once hidden under Mount Meru. Without the reversal of yin and yang, how could it not be sharpened by water and fire? Celestial slaying sharp, celestial slaying death, celestial trapping red light everywhere. The celestial slaying transformation was endless. The blood of the Daluo deities stained his robe. The ballad that was once famous in the ancient times described the terror of the 4 celestial slaying swords. Today, the 4 swords reappeared and killed the primordial god-fiend. Chapter 1340. In the galaxy, the battle of gods had reached its end. The 4 immortal slaying swords appeared, and a boundless demonic aura spread, destroying heaven and earth. In front, the ancient god-fiend's expression changed, and shock appeared in his eyes for the first time. The 4 immortal slaying swords. the four peerless divine weapons that were famous in the ancient times. In the galaxy, two extreme forces clashed, and the river of forgetfulness started to collapse even before the ultimate move was used. Ha! The god-fiend roared, and a giant black figure appeared in the sky. He looked down at the world with a cold gaze. The Lord of Hell, the supreme god of the seven absolute heavens, appeared, causing heaven and earth to collapse. The next moment, the Lord of Hell half knelt and bowed. The supreme Lord of Hell bowed, and even heaven and earth couldn't withstand this bow, collapsing. In front, the spirit chi around Ningchen collapsed under the influence of this terrifying power, and it couldn't stop the god-fiend's forbidden spell. Arg! Ningchen grunted, and cracks appeared around him. Heaven and earth couldn't withstand the bow of the Lord of Hell, not even the knowing destiny state. Go! Ningchen clenched his teeth and forcefully stabilized his body. With a shout, he launched a powerful counterattack. The four immortal slaying swords roared, and a demonic aura surrounded them. The four immortal swords were famous in the ancient times, and even the gods and Buddhas feared them in their heyday. Although they weren't complete now, the four immortal swords still had the power to kill gods. When the immortal swords appeared, heaven and earth shook, and four giant cracks appeared in the galaxy, spreading into the distance. With shocking power, heaven and earth sank, and the four swords appeared in front of the god-fiend in an instant. The god-fiend's expression darkened, and he summoned wind and clouds with his hands. Black air currents overlapped, forming a protective barrier that blocked the four immortal swords. Boom! Earth-shattering clashing noises filled the air. The four immortal swords dispersed the chi of gods and demons. They were so powerful that even gods and demons could not shake them. With a life-and-death crisis, the god-fiend's expression changed again. He roared, and his body changed again. His streamlined muscles expanded rapidly as if they were filled with air, becoming a little scary. Black patterns appeared on the god-fiend's face. They were like talismans, emitting an aura that could destroy everything. With a single punch, the mortal and divine realms were blasted apart. A wave of astonishing power descended, one that had never been seen before. It was truly shocking. With a loud rumble, the immortal sword shook the talisman. An intense shockwave spread out, and everything within a radius of 1,000,000 miles was reduced to nothingness. With a shocking explosion, the heavens and earth were in chaos. The might of the immortal sword eventually overpowered the power of the talisman. Wherever the remnant force reached, it destroyed everything. The god-fiend groaned, blood splattered out, and he retreated several steps. Blood splattered everywhere, dyeing the void red. In the blink of an eye, the white-clothed figure had arrived. Her cold eyes were filled with killing intent. Ningchen took a step forward and slashed open the last defense of the demon god with his sword, piercing through the demon god's chest. In the past 900 years, he was undoubtedly the #1 martial artist in the world. Today, he killed gods and demons with his sword. Ugh! The fiend god coughed out a mouthful of blood. Even though he had an undying and indestructible body, he was still severely injured at this moment. You won, the god fiend said weakly. Black gas filled its body as it began to devour itself. You still haven't told me where are their souls? Ningchen raised his hand and spiritual energy surged, suppressing the god fiend's body from collapsing. Those souls? The god fiend murmured softly. He looked at the horizon tiredly and said, Divine world, desireless heaven. After uttering these words, the god fiend's body dissipated, disappearing from the world. Ningchen frowned, looking at the god fiend's body. His heart felt heavy. In the end, the divine world couldn't be avoided? After standing still for a long time, Ningchen's figure merged into the void and disappeared. Half a month later, at the border between the All-Heaven Starfield and Luojia Starfield, a white-clothed figure walked out from the void above the Reverence Moon ancient ground. Ningchen waved his hand and opened the divine restriction above the ancient ground. Then he stepped inside. On the ancient ground, on the altar, the phoenix body sensed something and opened its eyes, looking at the horizon. For 900 years, the two bodies had been separated. One guarded the Z-Way divine realm while the other guarded the Reverence Moon ancient ground. They hadn't seen each other for 900 years. What's the matter? The phoenix body asked solemnly. A soul of Xanu's reincarnation was seized by someone from the divine world. I need your strength. Ningchen said seriously. Hearing that, the phoenix body's eyes shone with killing intent. Sure. On the altar, the Reverence Moon Clan's Grand Elder looked at the High Priestess and asked, High Priestess, are you going to the divine world? The phoenix body nodded and said, I will return as soon as possible. The Reverence Moon Clan's Grand Elder sighed and didn't say anything. In the void, Ning Chen's figure descended from the sky. His body merged into one and his aura was stronger than before. High Priestess. Right at this time, moonlight gathered above the Reverence Moon altar and an illusory figure appeared. Greetings, Moon God. Ning Chen saluted and said respectfully, No need to be so polite. Moon God said softly, 900 years ago, did you really decide to come to the divine world? I did. Ning Chen nodded and said with certainty, The mortal world and divine world are separated by several dimensions. In the past 900 years, your cultivation base and foundation have dissipated. If you go to the divine world now, I'm afraid your body won't be able to withstand it. Moon God said seriously, I have a special technique that can temporarily guide spiritual energy into my body. However, it won't last long. How long will it take to ascend to the divine world from the mortal world? Ning Chen asked seriously. You have the Phoenix secret art. If you use it at full strength, it will take about 3 days. Moon God said seriously. 3 days? Ning Chen's eyes narrowed slightly. 3 days was indeed too long. There was a limit to guiding spiritual energy into one's body. If the limit was exceeded, the body would collapse. Can you give me 10 days to prepare? Ning Chen looked at Moon God in the sky and asked. Moon God nodded and warned seriously, High Priestess, crossing dimensions is not an easy task. The mortal world and divine world are not like the mortal world and the devil world. If you want to come to the divine world, you must be fully prepared. If you are careless, your body and soul will be destroyed. I understand. I will be back on time 10 days later. Ning Chen said softly and left without saying anything else. From the beginning to the end, Ning Chen didn't ask anything about Wuyu Heaven because he could see that Moon God wasn't a god that was good at fighting. Although Moon God was powerful, it was only limited to the mortal world. The devil god that he fought not long ago was no less powerful than Moon God. It showed how powerful and terrifying Wuyu Heaven was. In the Crepe Myrtle Divine Realm, Ning Chen returned and walked down the Crepe Myrtle Peak without alerting anyone. On the Crepe Myrtle Peak, Lord Guyao opened his eyes and closed them again after a while. Under the Divine Peak, Black Phoenix raised his head and looked at the man in front of him. Murderous intent surged in his eyes. It's you. I'm going to kill you. The Black Phoenix roared furiously, and his hatred overflowed into the heavens. Do you know why I spared your life? Ning Chen stepped forward and said indifferently. Black Phoenix was stunned and didn't react. Because you are my last resort. Ning Chen raised his hand and inserted it into Black Phoenix's Dantian Sea of Qi. A terrifying devouring power spread out and kept eating away at Black Phoenix's origin. In an instant, Black Phoenix fire filled Ning Chen's body and his aura rose rapidly. In the battle 900 years ago, the foundation of the knowing destiny state was destroyed and couldn't be repaired. However, the Phoenix body and Black Phoenix came from the same source and could merge their powers better. Ugh. Black Phoenix's face twisted in pain as his origin was taken away. The power of the Imperial Path quickly filled Ning Chen's body. Although it couldn't last long, it could temporarily solve the problem in front of him. Half a day later, under the Crepe Myrtle Divine Peak, Black Phoenix's cultivation was completely devoured. His face became old and terrifying. Now that he had achieved his goal, Ning Chen didn't stay any longer. He turned and left the Divine Peak. Black Phoenix raised his head with difficulty and looked ahead. He said hoarsely, "Kill me." Ning Chen stopped and said lightly, "You are no longer worthy of my help." After that, Ning Chen's figure faded and disappeared. The Black Phoenix was stunned, and then he roared with laughter. There was sorrow and tears in his laughter. Was this his fate? Retribution, retribution. Chapter 1341. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Ningchen returned to the Reverence Moon ancient ground. His body was surrounded by black phoenix flames. His aura was so strong that it was almost as strong as a supreme emperor. Ningchen walked to the altar and looked at the moon god in the sky. Let's begin. In the void above, the moon god nodded lightly. She raised her slender hand, and a surge of majestic energy soared into the sky. Like a bright moon, it illuminated the entire Reverence Moon ancient ground. In the moonlight, an illusory world appeared. The endless path extended to the distant sky. The divine world is very far away. All I can do is to light a lamp and guide the way. You will need to cross several dimensions to reach it. I don't know what will happen in between. Remember, don't stop no matter what. If you get lost, you will be trapped in a different world forever. The moon god said seriously. I understand. Thank you, moon god. Ningchen bowed respectfully. Good luck. The moon god said softly. Ningchen nodded and looked at the people behind him. Wait for me to return. Farewell, High Priest. In front of the altar, thousands of Reverence Moon Clan people knelt down and sent him off. The Reverence Moon Clan people didn't like disputes. They guarded their ancestral ground day and night. Ningchen looked at them for a long time and sighed softly. He didn't want to stay any longer. The 8 dragons soared into the sky. The 8 dragons roared to the sky and rushed to the 9 heavens imperial court with the knowing destiny physique. The knowing destiny physique ascended. The whole world was shocked. All the experts in the major star fields looked at the sky with shock. At the horizon of the 9 heavens, 8 dragons roared. Among the 8 coiling dragons, a white-haired silhouette in plain clothes could be vaguely seen. The silhouette quickly flew up into the sky. It's the knowing destiny physique. In the various star fields, the Yama kings recognized the figure among the 8 dragons and exclaimed in shock. Young master, where are you going? In a corner of the Z-Way star field, Ruoshi asked with tears in her eyes. The divine world. Qingning sighed. Fate was never determined by one's will. Even though he gave up the chance to go to the divine world 900 years ago, he still had to take this step. At the end of the starry sky, in the myriad star field, a huge demonic figure walked out. He looked at the sky with a serious expression. He had finally left. 900 years. For a whole 900 years, he had not dared to appear in the world because of this child. When they met for the first time in the demonic will ocean, this kid was just an ant that he could crush with a single hand, yet in a mere 100 years, this kid had grown into an unprecedented ruler of the world. 900 years. In these 900 years, there was no more turmoil in the human world. Even the primordial demon realm did not dare to invade again. The human race regained its prosperity and truly entered a golden era. It could be said that this was the most peaceful 900 years of human history. It was a rare golden age since ancient times. Even though he was an enemy, he couldn't deny how powerful and stunning this young man was. However, he was going to leave this world today. In the starry sky, Xian Luo looked at the plain-clothed figure that was gradually disappearing into the distance. His expression was unusually complicated. An enemy of a lifetime was worthy of him appearing to send off. At this moment, Ningchen sensed something and looked at the distant Wanxiang starfield. Raise your sword. The mortal realm raised their swords for the last time. Their might shook the heavens and the earth. In an instant, sword light soared into the sky from all over the mortal realm. The majestic sword pressure permeated the entire mortal realm. In front of the Wanxiang starfield, Xian Luo focused and shouted. His fiend body was 100,000 feet tall. Chaotic fiend essence surged and the gods and Buddhas were frightened. Xian Luo roared and faced his only opponent in his strongest state. Boom! In an instant, billions of sword light broke through time and space and slashed towards Xian Luo. His opponent of a lifetime, parting for the last time. An earth-shattering collision resounded in the starry sky. Billions of sword light clashed with the chaotic fiend essence. It was as if the battle of slaying demons from 900 years ago had happened again. The scene was terrifying. Arg! Billions of sword light collapsed and the chaotic fiend Qi also dissipated. The last sword light pierced Xian Luo's chest and brought out a waterfall of blood. 900 years ago, knowing destiny killed the heavenly demon lord and suppressed the 100 races. 900 years later, knowing destiny was still powerful and invincible. 100 steps away, Xian Luo staggered and stabilized himself. He spat out a mouthful of blood and was severely injured. Xian Luo, I'll wait for your arrival in the divine world. Goodbye. Ning Chen's voice resounded in the starry sky and echoed in the human world. Xian Luo raised his hand and wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He suppressed his injuries and said, "Don't worry, I'll be there." Above the 9 heavens, Ning Chen retracted his gaze. The 8 dragons around him roared and sped up. Goodbye in the human world. As his voice fell, the 8 dragons broke through time and space and disappeared along with the knowing destiny body. Master! On the heavenly word peak in the Red Phoenix galaxy, Earth slowly opened her eyes and 2 streams of tears fell silently. There was a daughter in the heavenly word peak who was unique and independent. In the Buddhist nation, the current Buddhist lord, Erin Ming Wang, released the ant in her hand and sighed softly. Erin, even you can't let go? In the distance, on the Vow Mountain, Buddhist light gathered and the Buddha's voice sounded. How can I be heartless in my life? Erin Ming Wang said softly. You're the reincarnation of the Wisdom King and will eventually return to the Buddhist world. Erin, remember, don't be lustful, the Buddha advised. I understand. Erin Ming Wang nodded and replied. In the mortal world, karma is endless. Erin, there's only one knowing destiny Marquis in the human world. He's the closest person to God in the human world. You're not him, so you mustn't be tainted by too much karma, the Buddha advised again. Erin Ming Wang was silent for a long time before she said softly, I'll remember the Buddha's teachings. The master of the human world for 900 years ascended to the divine world, shocking all the galaxies. His last shout stunned the human world. From that day onwards, swordsmanship flourished in the human world. Countless young people embarked on the path of swordsmanship because of that earth-shattering shout. At the end of the starry sky, in a different dimension, time flew. Protected by the 8 dragons, Ning Chen's figure moved quickly towards the divine world under the guidance of the moon goddess. Traversing dimensions caused even time and space to become distorted. Around Ning Chen, the 8 dragons collapsed one after another, unable to withstand the corrosion of the space-time laws. After a day and a night, more than half of the 8 dragons around Ning Chen had collapsed. The remaining 3 were gradually reaching their limits. At this moment, at the end of the dimension, a huge beast mouth appeared and tried to swallow knowing destiny. It was an indescribable existence that lived by devouring time and space. At this moment, it appeared in front of knowing destiny and launched an attack. Ning Chen focused and waved his sword. The sword pressure spread and slashed the space-time beast open. It was a shocking scene. The space-time beast roared and its body collapsed, exploding. When the space-time beast exploded, the power of time and space that it had devoured earlier overflowed and distorted the dimension. The path ahead was unclear. Ning Chen stopped in his tracks. 3 huge dragons coiled around him, and the roars of the dragons lingered in the air. In an unknown region of the divine world, a beautiful figure opened her eyes and looked into the distance with a worried expression. The space-time beast. He actually encountered it. This was troublesome. A beast that could devour time and space. It was terrifying. However, the most terrifying thing was that such a beast would never appear alone. Instead, thousands of them appeared at the same time. Before he could finish his thoughts, in the strange dimension, huge shadows appeared around Ning Chen. They were endless and boundless. 10, 100, 1,000 beasts that were as huge as mountains appeared in the dimension. Ning Chen stood quietly among them. He was as small as an ant. Sure enough, it won't be so smooth. Ning Chen's expression turned cold. He clenched his right hand and in a purple light he and his sword appeared. He didn't know what these monsters were, but they definitely wouldn't be easy to deal with. Roar! The space-time beast roared and invisible sound waves spread rapidly. In the dimension, time and space began to collapse, turning into dust and disappearing. The three giant dragons around Ningchen collapsed in response. They could not withstand this terrifying sound wave. Ningchen stood still for a moment and finally moved. He had never seen such a power before. He and his sword became one. Heaven and earth changed. In the dimension, the purple sword light cut through time and space, slashing the space-time beasts one after another. It was so fast that it was unbelievable. Knowing Destiny, who had mastered the laws of time and space, entered time and space. Every sword was faster than the limit of martial arts. In the blink of an eye, thousands of space-time beasts in the dimension were beheaded. The terrifying power of time and space surged and disturbed the dimension. Ningchen's body was surrounded by black phoenix flames. His figure flashed and rushed into the turbulence of time and space. In the divine world, the moon god felt it and let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had the phoenix secret technique and 2 god seals. Otherwise, he would have been lost in the endless turbulence of time and space. Moon god, are you waiting for someone? At this moment, a cold voice sounded behind the moon god. Chapter 1342. Elder Brother. The moon goddess looked back at the person who had come and said, "Do you remember the human I mentioned to you before? He's coming to the god realm." Behind her, a man in golden robes stopped in his tracks. His handsome face was as dazzling as the morning sun. The rising sun god was a famous and powerful god in the god realm. Unlike the moon goddess who was not good at fighting, the sea god's existence was the symbol of the war god. A human? The sea god asked in confusion. Is a mere human worth your time? He's different. The moon goddess said softly. In him, I see the pureness, strength, kindness, and a stubbornness to never give up. Oh! The sea god's eyes flashed. This is the first time I've seen you speak so highly of someone. The moon goddess smiled. Soon, he'll come to the god realm. Perhaps, when you see him, you'll have the same opinion of him as you. The sea god snorted. I hope so. The moon goddess smiled and said no more. Her brother was a very proud person. Even in the god realm, there were only a few people who could gain his approval. It was impossible for him to accept a human now. However, she believed that the high priest would change his opinion of humans. Her brother's personality and experience were the complete opposite of the high priest's. However, the pride in their bones was very similar. In a world where the strong were respected, there was no room for weakness. To the side, the rising sun god stood quietly in the god realm. He looked at the vast territory in front of him. Although his eyes were cold, there was a trace of expectation. He knew his sister better than anyone. She was gentle and friendly to humans, which was rare in the god realm. However, a god would always be a god. The moon goddess had her own pride and would not easily accept a mortal. What kind of person was the reverence moon high priest? He hoped he wouldn't be disappointed. At the same time, in an alternate dimension, time and space were disrupted. Black flames spread in the endless turbulence of time and space, cold and heavy. Inside the flames, a white-haired figure in white clothes stood quietly. Even though the turbulence of time and space eroded him, he didn't lose himself for a moment. After Nether's spring and flowing time had been completed, Ningchen had become the only person in the world who could control the laws of time and space at the same time. Even if he was in the turbulence of time and space, he would still be safe and sound. In the outside world, another day and night passed. Ningchen had stayed in the isolated space for 2 days and nights. The 8 dragons had been destroyed, and more than half of his phoenix origin had been consumed. At the end of the alternate space, the bright moon shone like a beacon in the darkness, guiding the knowing destiny state to move forward. After 2 days and 2 nights, Ningchen had already traveled more than half the distance. He had crossed countless dimensions and was not too far away from the deity realm. However, the wariness in Ningchen's heart did not lessen in the slightest. The moon goddess had warned him that the journey to the god realm would be fraught with danger. It would not be strange for anything to happen. He did not want to fail at the last moment because of carelessness. In the chaotic flow of time and space, the phoenix flames burned even more fiercely. Ning Chen's figure gradually became indistinct as he transformed into a black phoenix and rapidly flew forward. In the human world, day and night passed. The sun set in the west and a day passed. Night came. 2 days after knowing destiny left, the world was peaceful for a short while. Nothing much happened. However, the atmosphere of uneasiness gradually spread in the human world. It was indescribable and unclear. The departure of the ruler of the human world meant that the human race had lost its most powerful guardian. How could the human race resist the calamity if it came again? On the third night of the Wanxiang starfield, Xian Luo, who had been in seclusion to heal himself, opened his eyes and slowly stood up. Knowing destiny had left, something must have happened in the human world. Otherwise, how could he be worthy of his 900 years of waiting? The dark night covered Xian Luo's eyes. The heavens could not see the suffering of the human world. Under the night sky, the demonic calamity came again. The flames of war burned the entire Wanxiang starfield. In the center of the starfield, Xian Luo stood in the sky. His 100,000 feet tall demonic body was indomitable. Chaotic demonic chi surged and swallowed one life planet after another. Territory Lord, help! On the life planet, cries shook the sky. Pairs of terrified eyes looked in despair at the demonic fire that covered the moon and swallowed the human world. This time, there was no silhouette in plain clothes standing in front of everyone. 900 years, the most prosperous time in the human world, had turned into a dream. The fear of the flames of war descended on the hearts of the people again. It's him, Xian Luo. In various starfields, the Yama kings of the underworld sensed it. They looked at the Wanxiang starfield in the north with heavy expressions. Let's go. In the Alcade starfield, Xia Zi glanced at Luo Fei and said. Luo Fei nodded and followed him, rushing to the north. In the heavenly transcendence sacred city, Luo Xingchen looked at the star scar bow in front of him. After a moment of silence, he also picked up the bow and left. The human world had been peaceful for 900 years. The 10 Yama kings of the underworld had also disappeared for 900 years. However, today, the demonic calamity came again. The Yama kings of the underworld had tacitly chosen to move out and rush to the Wanxiang starfield. Knowing destiny had maintained the peace for 900 years. They couldn't sit and watch anyone destroy it. Just as the flames of war rose again in the human world, knowing destiny transformed into a black phoenix and rushed to the divine world at full speed. The blazing black flames were dazzling. In the blink of an eye, they had crossed countless spacetime. In front of them, the bright moon illuminated the path to the divine world. The scene was like a moth flying into a flame. For countless years, many human race experts had been recognized by the divine world. They wanted to enter the divine world, but in the end, they fell in the dimensional space. Today, with the moon god leading the way, knowing destiny once again fought against the heavens. With a body without any foundation, he bravely rushed into the dimensional space. This was an unprecedented crazy action. Even the gods didn't dare to try. In the dimensional space, the phoenix's cry shook the sky as it spread its wings and soared. The chaotic flow of space-time eroded, but the phoenix's extreme speed wasn't affected at all. It crossed the endless space-time and rushed toward the divine world. After 3 days and 2 nights, the black flames around the phoenix's body had become very weak. The origin energy seized from the black phoenix was almost exhausted. There wasn't much left. Having lost his foundation and cultivation, knowing destiny couldn't regenerate his energy. However much he consumed, he lost. Finally, just as the aura of the divine world was faintly discernible, the black phoenix scattered in the space-time turbulence. The white-haired figure in white clothes appeared. The power of the black phoenix in his body was completely exhausted. Less than 1/10 of the journey, success was imminent. The brilliance of the bright moon shone into the dimensional space, but knowing destiny had no energy left. In the divine world, the moon god felt it and trembled slightly. Did he fail? Beside her, The rising sun god saw the change in his sister's expression and asked calmly. The moon god was silent. After a moment, she said, "I believe in him." In the dimensional space, even the gods can't say for sure that they can protect themselves, let alone a human who has lost his cultivation. Moon god, when did you become so naive? The rising sun god said lightly, "Brother, in human emotions, there is a kind of emotion called trust. You should also try to trust others. Perhaps you will gain something unexpected," the moon god said softly. "I, the rising sun god, only trust power. Only absolute power can decide one's own fate," the rising sun god said coldly. The moon god sighed softly and didn't say anything more. She looked into the distance, unable to hide the worry in her eyes. In the dimensional space, the origin of the black phoenix in Ning Chen's body dissipated. The flames on his body also disappeared. His physical body was exposed to the space-time turbulence and could collapse at any time. At this moment, thunder roared in the dimensional space. The strange thunder blasted open the space-time turbulence and blocked the path. Blue lightning was rare in the mortal world. Each bolt of lightning was 3 meters thick. When the lightning struck, even the dimensional space distorted violently. Not good. The blue lightning appeared in the dimensional space. In the divine world, the moon god's expression changed, and she clenched her fists. Blue malevolent lightning. The rising sun god's eyes narrowed. This human's luck was really bad. He actually encountered this monster. Every space-time had its own laws that didn't allow the outside world to invade it. The blue malevolent lightning existed to eliminate everything that didn't belong to it. Strictly speaking, the blue malevolent lightning wasn't lightning, but a kind of law of the great Tao. Even gods and demons didn't dare to face it directly. In the dimensional space, the blue malevolent lightning fell from the sky with earth-shattering power and endless destruction. Below, Ningchen looked at the lightning coming from all directions. Black chi was faintly discernible in his eyes. Chapter 1343. In the alternate space, the sky was filled with thunder and lightning. Like a blue wave, it rushed toward the knowing destiny state. The Great Path's rules could destroy the world. Even gods and Buddhas were afraid of its terrifying power. Ningchen stood in the middle of the green thunderbolts. There was no fear in his calm face. In the past 900 years, the world had changed. All the martial artists in the world had improved rapidly. There were many supreme emperors and the human race had prospered. However, in the past 900 years, knowing destiny had been standing on the Ziwei Divine Mountain and watching over the human world. To be precise, compared to the battle 900 years ago, knowing destiny had reached the phenomenal level of swordsmanship. However, his cultivation had dissipated. In the eyes of some people, the master of the human world who had guarded the immortal land for 900 years was no longer at his peak. However, knowing destiny had never been weaker than anyone. That was the case 900 years ago and 900 years later. Boom! The green thunderbolt descended. At this critical moment, an extremely terrifying pressure spread out from Ning Chen's body. It was powerful and heavy. Chaotic demonic chi appeared. Ning Chen's eyes turned dark. No white could be seen in his eyes. The most powerful heavenly demon body, the chaotic demonic body, had appeared. In the past 900 years, Ning Chen had refined the body of the heavenly demon lord and kept it a secret. No one in the world knew about it. The human sword disappeared and the demonic sword was unsheathed. The peerless divine weapon made of deep-sea iron showed its power today. The black blade was extremely cold. Ning Chen held the sword and shook the heavens. Boom! The two forces collided, and the alternate space-time collapsed with a loud rumble. The chaotic flow of space collapsed, and a boundless expanse appeared. In the realm of the gods, the rising sun god felt the powerful force from the alternate dimension. Yueshin, didn't you say that his foundation and cultivation were destroyed? The Huashan asked. The Yueshin also recovered from the shock. She thought for a while and said, in the battle with the heavenly demon lord, the high priest's demonic body was seriously injured and fell into a deep sleep. Only his original body and the phoenix body participated in the battle. Perhaps because of this, the high priest's demonic body retained part of his foundation and cultivation. The Huashan nodded slightly. The truth should be close. Now it seemed that the sealed heavenly demon lord had become a cauldron for Ning Chen's recovery. This person's ruthlessness was to his liking. Those who achieved great things did not bother about trifles, and any hypocrisy was meaningless. In a different space, Ning Chen transformed into a demon. His body was surrounded by chaotic demonic energy. The demonic sword moved, cutting apart the cleansing of the great Tao laws. In the blink of an eye, Ning Chen's figure flashed out and rushed forward with extreme speed. I'm finally free. In the god realm, the moon god heaved a sigh of relief. The high priestess's body was what she was most worried about. Be it the space-time turbulence or the green malevolent lightning, they were not something the high priestess could withstand. Fortunately, the high priestess managed to survive this ordeal. Your cultivation is average, and so is your foundation. However, your swordsmanship is not bad. The rising sun dragon god said nonchalantly. When the moon goddess heard this, she smiled gently and said, "Elder brother rarely praises others. It seems that I, the high priestess, have caught elder brother's eye." "Not bad, that's all," the rising sun flood god said calmly. "He's still far from my standards. Over the years, among those who have ascended to the god realm, he can't be considered outstanding. With Big Brother's vision, of course, there are not many people he likes," Moon God said with a bit of dissatisfaction. "That's not the case. 900 years ago, there was a swordsman who ascended to the divine realm from the mortal realm. He didn't even have a god to guide him. Even in the divine realm, that person's swordsmanship is astounding." Hearing this, the moon goddess immediately realized who her brother was talking about. She said softly, "That is the high priest's teacher, the legend of the sword in the human world." "Legendary?" The rising sun flood god murmured, then nodded. "He is worthy of that name." Unfortunately, no one knew the whereabouts of that swordsman after he came to the god realm. He really wanted to see that person's sword. While the two of them were talking, Ning Chen used his devil body to break through the obstruction of the blue malevolent lightning and continued onward. Ahead of them, the aura of the god realm became clearer and clearer. The bright moonlight was extremely brilliant, and it was as dazzling as the divine sun. The divine world was right in front of his eyes, and Ning Chen's heart stirred. Suddenly, Ning Chen's heart jerked, and he looked around vigilantly. Just a moment ago, his sword heart had actually fluctuated. After 1,000 years of cultivation, his sword heart wouldn't be easily shaken. Why would he be so excited when he was just close to the divine realm? A human? At this moment, an illusory figure appeared in the turbulence of time and space. Her long white hair danced in the wind, and her face was blurry. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the woman in front of him. His expression hardened. She wasn't human, but she didn't look like one of the 100 races either. What kind of monster was she? The woman raised her hand, and her long white hair quickly spread out, locking onto the knowing destiny state. Seeing this, Ning Chen immediately dodged. He raised his devil sword and slashed at her. The sword slashed down, and a few strands of hair fell. The indestructible divine weapon lost its power at this moment. It was like an ordinary sword that could only cut through a few strands of the woman's hair. Mirror Heart Demon. In the divine realm, the rising sun flood god's lips curved into a cold smile. This was going to be interesting. This kid's luck wasn't very good. Each monster he met was more troublesome than the last. "Brother!" Seeing the smile on her brother's face, the moon goddess was a little displeased. "Didn't you say the mirror heart demon rarely appears?" The rising sun god smiled indifferently. The mirror heart demon is a demon omen in a human's heart. Although it's rare, it's truly immortal. Encountering this demon can only be blamed on this kid's bad luck. How can we get rid of this demon? The moon goddess revealed a worried expression. "I've said it before. The mirror heart demon is immortal. There's no way to kill it. Even I can't do it." The rising sun flood god calmly said. "Impossible. The moon goddess clenched her fists. There's always a way out. Even the heavenly Tao will give people a chance to live. It's just a mirror heart demon. How can it truly be immortal? Mirror heart, mirror heart. Unless he dies, this demon will never be destroyed. The rising sun flood god calmly said. The moon goddess's expression shook. Her eyes grew even more worried. In the alternate dimension, the mirror heart demon blocked the path. 3,000 strands of white hair blocked the path ahead. The sword in Ning Chen's hand lost its sharpness. Facing the mirror heart demon's obstruction, it showed signs of weakness for the first time. In a short time, Ning Chen also noticed the abnormality of the woman in front of him. His expression turned serious. In the turbulence of time and space, the mirror heart demon gently raised her hand. Streaks of blue light intertwined, forming an inescapable net that locked the front. Seeing this, Ning Chen's expression changed slightly. He changed the direction of his sword and slashed at the blue light. After a few breaths of time, the mirror heart demon attacked. The moment Ning Chen changed his move, the mirror heart demon moved at the same time. Blade light condensed and slashed out. Boom! The sword and the blade collided. Time and space collapsed. The incomplete Ning Chen was immediately forced back several steps. Blood spilled from the hand holding the sword. Before he could recover, the woman's figure appeared in front of him again. Her extremely fast speed surpassed the limits of heaven and earth. Her sword light was deadly. Clang. Sword against sword, the ultimate confrontation. A battle of absolute speed. Every move was dangerous. Boom. After 100 moves, the woman's palms suddenly filled with ghost chi. She used all her strength to land a palm on Ning Chen's chest. A pool of blood splattered. Ning Chen retreated again and again. It was obvious that he was going to lose. He had never met such a powerful opponent. She knew all the moves and techniques in Ning Chen's memory and even the flaws. Every move she made was enough to defeat the enemy. 100 steps away, Ning Chen wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the woman in front of him with a blurry face. His expression turned cold. The butterfly in the flower, Mu Qingxue, and the ghost girl. These were the 3 women that he felt the most guilty toward in his life. They were also the 3 that left the deepest impression on him. The moves that the woman in front of him used were from them. Thus, it could be seen that the source of the woman's power was his memory or the heart demon. If it was a normal day, he might be able to slowly find the flaws. However, he did not have the strength to do so now. Before the desperate situation, Ning Chen closed his eyes and raised his hand. Demonic chi gathered. Without hesitation, he slapped his palm on his head. Bang! In the alternate space, a shocking scene occurred. Ning Chen covered his head with blood spurting out like a mist. The past was like smoke, quickly reverberating in Ning Chen's mind. In an instant, everything turned into chaos. Oh! In the divine world, a strange light flashed in the rising sun demon god's eyes. His expression became serious for the first time. This kid's decisiveness really made him have a whole new level of respect for him. Ah! In the alternate space, Ning Chen covered his head. His memory was impacted. The mirror demon immediately cried out in pain. His illusory body flickered as if he would disappear at any time. In front of him, in the mist of blood, Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes. His eyes were scarlet red as if they were dyed in blood. Chapter 1344. In the alternate dimension, the mirror heart demon blocked his path. In the face of despair, Ning Chen covered his head and destroyed half of his memories. The mirror heart demon screamed in agony as her body trembled in pain. Ning Chen opened his eyes and walked forward step by step amidst the bloody mist that filled the sky. The mirror heart demon screamed as her slender hands turned into sharp claws and stabbed at Ning Chen's chest. Ning Chen stopped. His blood-stained hand grabbed the demon's claws and swung the demon's sword, cutting the woman's body in half. A final miserable cry resounded through the alternate dimension. The mirror heart demon vanished into thin air. In front of him, the moon shone brightly. The god realm was within his reach. Ning Chen walked forward step by step like a walking corpse. He didn't cry, didn't laugh, didn't speak, and didn't cry. Ning Chen's body was surrounded by black, chaotic, demonic energy. He had lost all of his past and turned into a real demon. Half a day later, Ning Chen walked out of the alternate dimension. The scenery around him changed. In front of him was a grotesque world that had never been seen before. In the void, there were many huge buildings standing in the void. They were like castles, majestic and magnificent. The Rising Sun Divine Palace was one of the few forces in the God realm because of one person, the Rising Sun Dragon God. In front of the palace, two figures stood quietly, a man and a woman. The man was dressed in golden armor and had a handsome face. Beside the man, the woman's face was beautiful. She wore a white dress that fluttered in the wind. "He's here," the Rising Sun Dragon God said lightly. "Unfortunately, his memories are destroyed. He's worthless." The moon goddess didn't pay attention to her brother. She stepped forward and flew forward. 1,000 miles away, Ning Chen looked up at the woman in front of him. There was no color in his dark eyes. After a few breaths, the moon goddess flew over. Looking at the man in front of her, a smile appeared on her beautiful face. She said softly, "High Priest, welcome to the God realm." Swoosh! The sword light cut through the void, black and dazzling. Feeling the great threat from the woman's cultivation, Ning Chen's immediate reaction was to kill her. The moon goddess's expression changed slightly. Has he really turned into a demon? At this moment, golden light gathered in front of the moon goddess. The Rising Sun Dragon God walked out and raised his hand to block the demonic sword. "Brother, don't hurt him," the moon goddess said anxiously from behind. "If you don't get hurt, how can you learn a profound lesson?" The Rising Sun Flood God said coldly. He flicked his two fingers and a powerful force exploded, sending the knowing destiny cultivator flying. 100 miles away, Ning Chen's body crashed into a huge mountain. The mountain collapsed with a loud bang, and crushed stones filled the sky. The difference in strength was unbelievable. Only one move was enough to defeat knowing destiny. "Men," the Rising Sun Flood God said. "Thundering God." The void shook as two golden-armored divine generals walked out and bowed respectfully. "Offending the moon god is unforgivable. Lock him in the heavenly fire purgatory," the Rising Sun Demon God said coldly. "Yes." The two golden-armored generals gave their orders and disappeared. When they reappeared, they were already in front of the collapsed mountain. "Elder brother." The moon goddess looked anxious and said, "He is injured. If he enters the heaven fire purgatory, he will definitely die. You cannot do this. He is now a demon. He is no longer the reverence moon high priest you once knew." The Rising Sun Flood God was unmoved. His expression was cold. "Do you really want my brother to ignore a demon?" "But," the moon goddess said anxiously. "No buts. I will only lock him up for 10 days. After 10 days, if he can walk out of the heaven fire purgatory alive, I will let him go. Otherwise, whether he lives or dies will be up to fate," the Rising Sun Flood God said coldly. 100 miles away, in front of the collapsed mountain, two golden-armored divine generals dragged out the human buried under the mountain. Then they flew toward the Rising Sun Divine Palace in the distance. "Let's go back to the palace," the Rising Sun Flood God said calmly. The Rising Sun Flood God said calmly before his figure faded away and disappeared. The moon goddess clenched her fists and followed. Behind the Rising Sun Divine Palace, in front of an abnormally hot purgatory, two golden-armored divine generals appeared and threw knowing destiny down. In front of them was a bottomless valley. Heavenly fire filled the air, and the terrifying temperature distorted the space of the god world. Ning Chen fell from the sky and crashed into the bottom of the valley. In an instant, heavenly fire raged and swallowed knowing destiny's body. The two divine generals left. Not long after, the moon goddess appeared in the sky above the heaven fire purgatory. She looked down at the unconscious knowing destiny with worry in her eyes. "High priest," the moon goddess said. Moonlight rose around her, and a steady stream of divine power spread out toward the heaven fire purgatory below. At this time, in the central palace of the Rising Sun Divine Palace, The rising sun flood god shone with golden light and imprisoned the heaven fire purgatory. Moon goddess, are you going to defy your brother's orders? The rising sun flood god said sternly in the sky. The moon goddess trembled in the sky above the heaven fire purgatory, and her expression dimmed. Her brother's strength was not something she could fight against. If the high priest wanted to live, he could only rely on himself. In the heaven fire purgatory, Ning Chen's chaotic demonic chi swirled around him, automatically protecting his master. Demonic chi surged like waves, but the heavenly fire was endless and quickly consumed the power of the chaotic demonic chi. The heaven fire purgatory was a famous place of death in the god world. Even gods would be burned to death if they were trapped in it. In the heaven fire purgatory, one's divine essence could not be recovered. It was the same for true chi and demonic chi in the mortal world. With the corrosion of the heavenly fire, no one could last long. 10 days seemed short, but to those in the heaven fire purgatory, it was longer than 100 years. On the first day, Ning Chen was unconscious in the heaven fire purgatory. However, with the protection of the chaotic demonic chi, he barely made it through. On the second day, there was not much chaotic demonic chi left around Ning Chen. Under the intense consumption, his body was on the verge of drying up. In front of the central palace, the rising sun flood god's eyes were cold. The arrogance of a god was obvious. In front of the moon goddess palace, the moon goddess looked at the heaven fire purgatory. She was worried. In the past 2 days, the high priest's strength was almost exhausted. How would he endure the next few days? Brother, what are you thinking? She knew a little about her brother. Although he was arrogant, he did not kill. Moreover, there was no enmity between him and the high priest. There was no reason for him to kill him. At the same time, in the distant west, Sanskrit chants resounded. Lotuses bloomed in the void, and multicolored lights streaked across the sky. The Western Buddhist world was the strongest force in the west of the God world. The current Western Buddhist world was profound and unparalleled. In the sky above the Buddhist world, Bodhisattvas and ancient Buddhas sat cross-legged. Spiritual light flickered behind them. In the Western world, Buddhism was widely spread. The Buddhas were revered, and no force could shake them. On this day, on the lotus platform, Western Buddhist world opened his eyes. He looked to the south and said, "Golden wings." Buddha. A golden-winged great prung flew over, turning into a human and bowing respectfully. Bring a 9 transformations heaven reversal pill to the rising sun divine palace. 8 days later, if the human imprisoned in the purgatory of heavenly flames by the rising sun divine god is still breathing, feed this pill to him, Buddha Shilai said. Yes. The golden-winged great Purng accepted the order. He spread his wings and soared to the 9 heavens. Buddha, the 9 revolutions heaven reversal pill is our Buddhist world's most precious treasure. Isn't it inappropriate to give it to a human? In the void, an ancient Buddha asked. All living beings are equal. Saving a life is better than building a 7-storied pagoda. This human had once helped the Buddhist nation in the mortal realm to fight against the invasion of the devil realm. That 9 transformations heaven reversal pill can be considered as a thank you gift from the Western Buddhist realm, Buddha West Approaches replied. In the void, the ancient Buddha clasped his hands together and bowed respectfully. He did not say anything else. In the southern part of the divine world, in the heaven fire purgatory of the rising sun divine palace, Ning Chen's chaotic demonic chi was exhausted. The heavenly fire entered his body, and intense pain came. Ning Chen slowly opened his eyes. There was no white in his dark and deep eyes. Ning Chen growled and resisted the power of the heavenly fire with his strong physical body. As the heavenly fire devoured his body, the last bit of the heavenly demon's origin was stimulated to protect his body. However, in just 1 day, the heavenly demon's origin was completely destroyed. Ning Chen's body began to burn. Endless pain invaded his body, crazily eroding the last bit of his rationality. In the sky above the heaven fire purgatory, the moon goddess appeared. Looking at the scene below, her eyes flashed with pity. It was only the 4th day. There were still 6 days left. The high priest's body could not hold on any longer. A low growl reverberated in her ears, full of pain. The moon goddess closed her eyes and sighed softly. Since she couldn't save him, then she might as well free him from this endless pain. The moon goddess raised her hand and the moonlight shone brightly. She slammed her palm down on the knowing destiny who was suffering in the heavenly fire. Chapter 1345. The realm of the gods was vast and boundless, and there were countless factions. The most ancient of them could be traced back to the ancient times. Unlike the mortal world, there was no absolute ruler in the realm of the gods. The strength of the gods did not allow for the emergence of a common ruler. The West Buddha, Lord of the West, the Rising Sun Ho God of the South, the Empress of the North, the Lord of the East, and so on. There were too many terrifying powerhouses in the realm of the gods. They had lived since the ancient times and even the ancient times. Similar to the gods, there were also powerful demons in the realm of the gods. They were not the demons that humans spoke of, nor were they real demons. In the legends of the realm of the gods, the most powerful demons were as strong as the giants of the realm of the gods. However, for tens of thousands of years, the demons had disappeared without a trace. However, on this day in an unknown space, an abnormally powerful existence opened his eyes and looked at the rising sun divine palace. A strange look flashed in his eyes. This time, the one who had ascended to the realm of the gods was a demon. Demon envoy, go to the rising sun divine palace and bring the demon who ascended to the realm of the gods. As he spoke, a figure shrouded in devil chi walked out. In an instant he disappeared without a trace. Just as the Buddhists and demons were about to move, Yueshin attacked in the sky above the purgatory of heavenly fire. She wanted to end the endless pain of the knowing destiny stage. Yueshin. At this moment, an unparalleled pressure descended from the sky. The rising sun Ho God walked out and waved his hand to disperse Yueshin's attack. Brother, Yueshin's face darkened. For the first time, she looked angry. He can't last 10 days. Do you want to torture him to death? Hearing his sister's question, the rising sun Ho God's expression did not change. Didn't you say you trusted him? Why have you lost faith in him now? Yueshin was stunned. She looked down at the tortured high priest and a complicated look flashed in her eyes. Could it be that she didn't really trust the high priest? But how could the high priest, who had a mortal body, survive 10 days? After hesitating for a long time, Yueshin sighed and turned to leave. Perhaps it was as her brother said. She should trust him. In the sky above the purgatory of heavenly fire, the rising sun demon god raised his hand, and the divine fire of the sun spread out and disappeared into the purgatory. In an instant, waves of fire surged within the purgatory of heavenly flames, and its power increased by several times. In purgatory, Ning Qin had already turned into a flaming man. Heavenly fire burned around him. Endless pain assaulted his mind. Ning Qin groaned in extreme pain. He let out a low growl from his throat, like a wounded beast, in pain and helplessness. Ning Qin was in great pain. Fragments of memories from 1,000 years ago flashed in his mind. His struggle under the heaven flame appeared again. It was almost the same scene. 1,000 years ago, knowing destiny broke his oath and was burned by the heavenly fire. Today, the heavenly fire burned him again and his power was 1,000 times stronger. Ugh! His groans were low and oppressive. Ning Qin staggered and couldn't even stand properly. However, the pride in knowing destiny's bones did not allow him to fall. He forced himself to endure the pain of being burned by the heavenly fire. The 4th day gradually passed, and the 5th day arrived. There was still more than half of the 10 days left. In the heavenly fire, Ning Chen's internal organs were all damaged. Although he could still maintain his human appearance, he had lost 90% of his life force. This day was already the final limit. Finally, on the 5th day, Ning Chen's arms hung limply in the purgatory of heavenly flames. His last bit of life force had disappeared. In the moon god palace, the moon god closed her eyes and sighed in her heart. Did she not make it in the end? At the same time, outside a small city under the protection of the sunrise divine palace, Apricot flowers bloomed, and the fragrance of the flowers spread for 100 miles. In front of the ancestral temple in the small city, 3 8-year-old human children knelt on the ground with pious expressions. In front of the 3 children stood an elder. Their auras were powerful, and they were no weaker than human kings. Let's begin. The one standing in the middle of the 3 old men spoke with a solemn expression. Okay. The other 2 elders nodded and pressed their hands on the children's heads at the same time. In the next moment, a shocking scene occurred. An extremely powerful aura shot up into the sky from the 3 children's bodies. Boundless divine power rose rapidly. The heavenly awakening was a ritual that all children in the God world had to go through. After experiencing the heavenly awakening, the people of the God world could awaken their own power and truly embark on the path of cultivation. For 1 day and 1 night, the 3 elders protected the 3 children as they completed the heavenly awakening. They all looked exhausted. Everyone in the God world knew the importance of the heavenly awakening. If the heavenly awakening failed, the children would lose the right to cultivate, and their lives would be in danger. Therefore, when the children of the God world underwent the heavenly awakening, there would be elders protecting them just in case. Success. In front of the ancestral temple, the 3 elders stopped and looked relieved. Finally, there were 3 more children in the clan who had successfully undergone the heavenly awakening. Quick, feel what your abilities are, the children's parents said expectantly. The 3 children looked at each other and then used the divine power in their bodies to check their abilities. Boom! One of the children in the middle suddenly burned with boundless flames. It was pure and powerful, shocking everyone present. Grand Sun Primordial Flame, the child's parents exclaimed. In the entire God world, only the rising sun dragon god could control the Grand Sun Primordial Flame. For thousands of years, no one else had been able to awaken this ability during the heavenly awakening. Quickly restrain your aura. Don't let others detect it, an elder in front said with a serious expression. Hearing this, the child immediately retracted his divine power, not knowing what to do. It's the Grand Sun Primordial Flame. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, another elder said with a sigh. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, we can't avoid it. Let's hide the news first and think of a specific solution in the future, the 3rd elder said. Yes, that's the only way. The other 2 elders nodded. However, before they finished speaking, their expressions changed at the same time. Demonic chi surged in the void, and a figure shrouded in darkness walked out. Without warning, it directly grabbed the child who had awakened the Grand Sun Primordial Flame. Demon! Everyone present trembled at the same time. Why would a demon appear here? Run! The 3 elders reacted and immediately blocked the way, shouting angrily. None of you can leave. In the pervading demonic chi, the demon envoy said coldly. He waved his hand and pushed the 3 elders away. His figure swept out and reached for the child in front of him. How dare a demon from the demonic world set foot in the territory of the rising sun dragon god? Do you have a death wish? At this moment, in the sky above the small city, endless divine sun fire descended and filled the entire small city. In the divine sun fire, a man in golden battle armor descended from the sky. His face was handsome and valiant. The rising sun dragon god, the famous god of war of the demonic world, had descended in person. With the dragon god's arrival, the demonic chi in the small city was quickly burned away, leaving not a trace. In the demonic chi, the demon envoy's expression darkened. He didn't dare to stay a moment longer. He crushed the life-saving jade slip and disappeared. In the void, the rising sun dragon god watched the demon envoy leave and didn't stop him. Greetings, dragon god. Below, everyone bowed and said excitedly, Rise. As soon as he said this, the rising sun dragon god's figure descended. He stepped in front of the child who had awakened Tian Chi and said, Are you willing to return to the divine palace with me? The child shrank back, and fear flashed across his face. Yen, kneel down and thank the dragon god. At the side, the child's mother's eyes were filled with excitement. Hearing his mother's order, the child knelt down and said timidly, Yen Earth thanks the dragon god. You don't have to be afraid. I won't let you leave immediately and return to the divine palace with me. The rising sun dragon god looked at the child in front of him and said calmly, You just awakened Tianqi not long ago and haven't truly mastered the true fire of the sun 10 years later. If you can cultivate the true fire of the sun to an initial level, I will come and take you back to the divine palace. Thank you, dragon god, the child said respectfully after calming down a little. The rising sun dragon god nodded and didn't say anything more. He rose and left the small city. Rising sun divine palace, purgatory of heavenly fire. In the sea of fire, the knowing destiny body stood still, his consciousness fading away. Gradually, Ning Chen's skin cracked and peeled off. His blood and bones quickly turned to ash in the heavenly fire. The 6th day, the 7th day, the 10th day. In the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. In front of the central divine palace, the rising sun dragon god waved his hand and dispersed the imprisonment of the purgatory of heavenly fire. At this moment, in the 9 heavens above, the cry of a phoenix shook the world. Waves of fire shot up into the sky and turned into a huge shadow of a fire phoenix that blocked out the sun. Chapter 1346. In the divine world, in the sunrise divine palace, the winds and clouds changed drastically. In the purgatory of heavenly flames, flames engulfed the area and shot up to the 9 heavens. For 10 days, the heavenly fire burned his body. At the most crucial moment, the phoenix underwent nirvana and was reborn from the flames. Up in the sky, a sea of fire lingered. Within the sea of fire, phoenixes soared through the 9 heavens. The cries of phoenixes resounded throughout the divine world. In front of the central divine palace, the rising sun flood god narrowed his eyes as he looked at the sea of fire spreading across the horizon. Not dead, this human's life was really tough. Nirvana rebirth was indeed a unique talent of the phoenix. However, not every phoenix could be reborn from the ashes. Apart from the right time and place, the most important factor was the harmony of the people. This harmony was the strong will to survive. Regardless of whether it was a human or a god, without a strong will, they were destined to not be able to go far in cultivation. This kid passed the test. The moon goddess quickly walked out of the moon god hall. She looked up into the sky, her face filled with shock. Phoenix Nirvana. In the horizon, waves of fire surged and turned into fiery clouds that covered the sky. It was a shocking scene. At this moment, it was as if even the sky was burning. The phoenix was a deity who controlled the flames of heaven and earth during the Age of Legends. It was immortal and indestructible, able to be reborn from the ashes. Today, the legend had reappeared, shocking the world. In the territory of the divine palace, the people of the divine realm looked up at the sky, and their eyes flashed with surprise. It was the phoenix. Were there still phoenixes in the god realm? Phoenixes were not like dragons who had countless descendants. Phoenixes were noble by nature and would never intermarry with other races. Therefore, as long as it was a phoenix, it would definitely have the purest bloodline. However, the phoenix's ability to reproduce was very low. It had been tens of thousands of years since a phoenix had appeared in the god realm. The strange phenomenon in the sky above the sunrise divine palace alerted the neighboring major forces. The divine world, which had been quiet for a long time, was stirred up again. Go and find out what happened. The leaders of the various forces ordered. Yes. One by one, figures flew out and headed in the direction of Sunrise Divine Palace. Outside the Divine Palace, the demon envoy appeared. He looked into the sky and frowned. In fire purgatory, phoenix, demon. Was the devil that the demon lord was talking about him? If it was him, cultivating both god-fiend and demon would truly be extraordinary. Demonic chi surged. The demon envoy melted into the void and disappeared. Now that Sunrise God was in charge of the divine palace, she did not dare to get too close. She had to find another opportunity. In the void, the phoenix appeared. After a few breaths, a red-robed figure descended from the sky amidst the phoenix flames. His aura was as bright as the divine sun. He was half a step away from the sovereign realm, and his phoenix body had been reborn. His cultivation had improved further, and he was only a hair's breadth away from the sovereign realm. Below, a smile appeared on Moon Goddess's beautiful face. Looking at the man descending from the sky, she said, "High Priest, welcome back." "Greetings, Moon Goddess." In front of the Moon God Hall, Ningchen stopped and bowed respectfully. "There's no need to be so polite, High Priest." The Moon Goddess smiled. "The High Priest's injuries have just healed, so you should rest for a few days. Once the High Priest's body recovers, I will bring the High Priest around." "I'll do as you say." "Thank you, Moon Goddess." Ningchen bowed again. "Moon Spirit, take the High Priest to rest," ordered the Moon Goddess. "Yes." A beautiful maid walked out from the Moon God Hall and said respectfully, "High Priestess, please." Ningchen nodded and followed him. Not long after they left, golden light gathered in front of the Moon God Hall, and the rising sun god appeared out of thin air. He said calmly, "Moon Goddess." "Elder brother." Seeing who had come, the Moon Goddess bowed gracefully and said, "I apologize for misunderstanding you earlier." "No need." The rising sun god's tone was indifferent. "I just wanted to see how big this person was. If he can't walk out alive, then it's his fate. No matter what, the High Priest was able to recover his memories and phoenix body cultivation because of you." "I still have to thank you, Elder brother," said the Moon Goddess with a smile. His original body and demon body were destroyed, and only his phoenix body was left. "This result depends on whether he can accept it or not," said the rising sun god indifferently. The Moon Goddess heard this and sighed softly. "It's already not easy to keep one body intact. As for the original body and demon body that were destroyed, we can only think of a way in the future." The rising sun god nodded and didn't dwell on this topic. He changed the topic and said, "Previously, in the territory of the Divine Palace, a child awakened the solar primordial flame during the Tianqi. I'm sure you've sensed it." The Moon Goddess nodded and said, "Elder brother, didn't you make a personal trip there? What, is there a problem?" "I saw a devil there," said the rising sun flood god. The Moon Goddess's expression changed slightly. "Demons? Hadn't they disappeared for a long time? Did anything happen to that child?" The Moon Goddess quickly recovered and asked with concern. "If a demon appeared there, it must have sensed the child who awakened the solar primordial flame and wanted to harm him. I arrived in time." "That child is fine," said the rising sun god. However, a demon that hasn't appeared for tens of thousands of years has reappeared in the god realm. This means that the demon realm is about to make a big move. The Moon Goddess's expression hardened. Why had the demon realm, which had disappeared for so long, reappeared? "I don't know what the demon realm is planning to do. It's never too late to be careful. Moon Goddess, you must be careful these days as well. Don't give the demon realm an opportunity to take advantage of you," reminded the rising sun god seriously. "Yes." The Moon Goddess nodded and said softly, "Elder brother as well. Elder brother is the master of the rising sun divine palace. He must be their main target. You must not be careless." "I understand." The rising sun god nodded and didn't say anything else. Covered in golden light, he left the Moon Goddess palace. In the horizon, the divine sun moved west. Day gradually passed and the bright moon rose in the east. Night soon fell. The god realm didn't have day or night. However, not everyone in the god realm was as powerful as the Moon Goddess and the rising sun god. Although the original inhabitants of the god realm were much stronger than the mortals of the mortal world, they still needed to rest. Therefore, in the distant mythological era, several giants of the god realm worked together to create a divine sun and a divine moon to divide day and night. After tens of thousands of years, the god realm alternated day and night just like the mortal world. The sun and moon in the sky became a taboo in the god realm. No matter how powerful someone was, they didn't dare to break this rule. Night fell and the bright moon hung high in the sky. Outside the rising sun divine palace, demonic energy swirled. The demon envoy walked out and looked ahead. She didn't rush forward. She knew that the rising sun god was in the palace. Once she approached, she would be discovered. The mission given by the demon lord was to take away the demon who had ascended to the god realm. If she wasn't confident, she couldn't act rashly. Just as the demon envoy was waiting for an opportunity outside the palace, the golden-winged great Pring appeared in the distance. He looked at the palace in front of him and hesitated. According to the Buddha, if that human walked out of the purgatory of heavenly flames alive, he would give the 9 reincarnation heaven reversal pellet to him. But now, that human no longer needed the pellet. What should he do with it? The golden-winged great Pring struggled for a long time. Looking at the 9 transformation heaven reversal pill in his hand, a thought flashed through his mind. He swallowed the pill. In an instant, the Buddha energy in the golden-winged great Peng's body surged like raging waves. What a powerful pill! The golden-winged great Peng's eyes flashed with heat. The 9 transformation heaven reversal pill was worthy of being called a treasure of the Buddha world. It was comparable to ordinary divine medicines. In the central palace of the Rising Sun Divine Palace, the Rising Sun God opened his eyes and looked to the west. A cold smile flashed across his lips. Someone from the Buddha world? Since when did he become someone who only knew how to crow and steal? 1,000 miles to the west of the Rising Sun Divine Palace, the golden-winged great Pring felt the strong pressure from the Rising Sun Divine Palace. He didn't dare to stay any longer. He spread his wings and left quickly. In the distance, the demon envoy also felt the fluctuation of Buddha energy in the west. He frowned slightly. Someone from the Buddha world? Why are they here? It seemed that this demon who had ascended from the mortal world had attracted the attention of many forces. In front of a large hall in the divine palace, a red-robed figure stood quietly. He looked at the bright moon in the sky with a solemn expression. What exactly was desireless heaven? A force or a person? Xuanyu's soul had been taken. Her life was in danger. He had to find this Wu Tian as soon as possible. Chapter 1347. The heavenly palace was majestic and magnificent, floating in the void. It had existed for a long time, so long that it was untraceable. In front of a large hall, Ningchen stood quietly, thinking about the future. High Priest, haven't you rested yet? At some point, the moon goddess walked over with a smile. I can't sleep. Ningchen turned around, seeing the person, he said softly, Moon goddess, you don't rest too? I am Moon goddess. Moon goddess chuckled. She looked at the bright moon in the sky and said, Night is my favorite time. Hearing this, Ningchen smiled gently. He had forgotten about this matter. Is the moon of the heavenly realm the same as the human world? Moon goddess asked softly. Ningchen was stunned. Moon goddess, have you never been to the human world? Moon goddess shook her head. Since the ancient times, the gods of the heavenly realm could no longer enter the human world. I was still young in the ancient times, so I have never been to the human world. However, Moon goddess paused, her expression turned serious. Now, the human world is going through the same drastic changes as the ancient times. Perhaps, in a few thousand years, the gods will be able to descend to the human world again. Ningchen heard this before, and his expression turned serious. If that was true, it was not good news. All right, I haven't asked you, why did you change your mind to come to the heavenly realm? Who took Xuanyu's soul? Moon goddess asked. Wu Tian. Ningchen only said 3 words, looking at the woman beside him, waiting for an answer. Moon goddess's body trembled, fear flashed in her eyes. Xuanyu's soul was taken by Wu Tian? After a long time, Moon goddess calmed herself down and asked. Ningchen nodded, his eyes narrowed. Seems like Moon goddess knows about this Wu Tian. Do you know how many levels there are in the sky? Moon goddess sighed. 9. Ningchen replied. That's right. Moon goddess nodded. Then you should know that Nether King is the master of the 7 absolute heavens. I can only tell you now, Wu Tian is also one of the 9 heavens. His strength is far beyond what you can reach. As for other things, it's better if you don't know. Ningchen's expression darkened when he heard that. The situation seemed to be more serious than he thought. Xuanyu should not be the only one who has been taken away by Wu Yu heaven. Right now, there have been no large-scale deaths among the human race. This means that these souls are still safe and sound. So, you do not need to be too anxious, the moon goddess advised. Ningchen nodded lightly and asked, "What level of heaven is the God realm?" First level. However, the strength of the 9 heavens is not ranked by the number of heavens. The strength of the God realm is well known in the 9 heavens, and no one dares to rashly invade it. I see. Ningchen nodded slightly. No wonder the immortal realm seemed so peaceful. Whether it was the mortal realm or the immortal realm, one's own strength was ultimately the most important thing. After a short silence, the moon goddess looked at the man beside her and said, "High Priest, 900 years ago, I told you that the God realm might have a way to restore your foundation and cultivation. Now, I can tell you that there is indeed a way to restore your foundation and cultivation in the God realm." Hearing this, a strange look flashed across Ningchen's eyes. "Please tell me, moon goddess." "Tianqi," the moon goddess said seriously, "the people of the God realm will experience a Tianqi when they are children. After the Tianqi, these children will awaken different powers. To be able to turn a weak child into an expert that can move mountains and seas overnight, you can see how powerful the Tianqi is." "But I am not from the God realm," Ningchen questioned. "These powers should be the inherent potential of the people of the God realm. The Tianqi is only guiding these powers out. After all, it is not created from nothing." "That's right," the moon goddess replied. "In theory, you're just a mortal, so you don't have this kind of potential. However, nothing is absolute. Not everyone in the God realm can successfully obtain a heaven awakening, and it's not impossible for mortals to obtain a heaven awakening." "Moon goddess, you want me to try the Tianqi?" Ningchen asked softly. The moon goddess nodded and said, "Although the failure of the Tianqi will affect you, your current situation can't be any worse." Ningchen smiled helplessly. The truth seemed to be true. Other than the phoenix body, his main body and demon body had collapsed. If he could experience the Tianqi and revive his main body and demon body, it would be a good thing. If not, it could not be worse. "You agree?" the moon goddess asked softly. "Moon goddess, how can I refuse your good intentions?" Ningchen smiled. The moon goddess said seriously, "Since you agree, I will ask my brother to protect your Tianqi." Ningchen's expression changed. "Why do you need my brother? Moon goddess, can't you do it yourself? My brother's cultivation is much higher than mine. With him, your Tianqi will have a higher chance of success," the moon goddess replied. Hearing this, Ningchen's expression became serious. He bowed respectfully to the woman beside him. The kindness of the moon goddess was respectable, so he was willing to bow to her. The moon goddess was stunned. She immediately reached out to support him and said softly, "High Priest, you don't need to be so polite. This is what I promised you 900 years ago. I will do it with all my heart." Ningchen straightened up and looked at the god that the moon-worshipping clan had worshipped for countless years. At this moment, he finally understood why the moon-worshipping clan was so pious and peaceful. "High Priest, please rest. I will go see my brother." The moon goddess had something to do, so she did not stay. She turned and hurried toward the central palace. In the central godly palace, inside the spacious hall, many golden pillars stood tall, supporting the godly palace. Inside the godly palace, the rising sun demon god stood quietly. His cold and wise eyes stared ahead. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, the moon goddess walked in from outside the hall. She bowed and said, "Brother, may I come in?" The rising sun demon god looked away and said calmly, "Come in." With permission, the moon goddess stepped into the hall. She looked at her brother and said softly, "Brother, I have a request." "Is it about that human?" the rising sun demon god asked. The moon goddess nodded and said, "I would like to ask you to help the high priest try the heavenly awakening." "Moon goddess, do you know what you are saying?" The rising sun demon god said coldly, "He is just a human. Even if he is from the divine world, how can he be qualified for me to personally help him awaken?" I know your identity is special and you can't act rashly. However, this may be the only way for the high priest to recover his foundation and cultivation. Therefore, I beg you to make an exception and help the high priest this one time." The moon goddess said with a pleading expression. "Moon goddess, I don't understand you anymore." The rising sun demon god said calmly, "A mere human can make you lower yourself to help him again and again. You even came to me to ask for help. What is so special about him that you are willing to do so much for him?" "Hope," the moon goddess said softly. "I see hope in him. He is the kind of person who will never give up in the face of despair. He will work harder and harder until hope arrives. The divine world is too peaceful, but the mortal world is different. The flames of war are endless and disasters occur everywhere. Only those who carry hope can bring hope to those around them. Brother, I don't want such a person to be unable to see the light. If that happens, the mortal world will be completely without hope." The rising sun demon god quietly listened to his sister's words. After a long time, he sighed softly and said, "There will be no next time." The moon goddess's face lit up when she heard this. She bowed respectfully and said, "Thank you, brother." Too many things happened during this long night. In the east, the first rays of the morning sun shone down, and light once again descended upon the divine world. The sky brightened. Not long after Ningchen entered the hall to rest, the moon goddess dragged him out and they went to the central palace together. The central palace was the center of the entire rising sun divine palace. It was where the master of the palace, the rising sun demon god, resided. For countless years, no one dared to rashly set foot there. In front of the palace, the rising sun demon god, clad in golden battle robes, stood quietly. Golden light swirled around him, making him look valiant and heroic. "Brother, I've brought him." The moon goddess bowed and said softly when the two arrived. "I am Ningchen. Greetings, rising sun demon god." Ningchen also bowed politely. "There is no need for unnecessary words. Prepare to begin," the rising sun demon god said calmly. The moon goddess nodded. She looked at the man beside her and said, "Don't be nervous. With your brother here, nothing will happen." Ningchen smiled and said, "Thank you for your trouble." Then, Ningchen walked forward and sat down on the ground. He closed his eyes and relaxed his mind. In front of the palace, the rising sun demon god walked down and raised his right hand. Suddenly, a terrifying pressure that could suppress the heavens spread out and enveloped the two of them. Not far away, the moon goddess clenched her fists. She was so nervous that she even forgot to breathe. Chapter 1348. In the central palace of Sunrise Divine Palace, the divine fire of the sun surged, and a terrifying pressure shook the heavens. The master of the divine palace, the rising sun dragon god, had personally come to protect Tianqi. Powerful divine power entered Ningchen's body, and the phoenix origin automatically protected its master. When the two forces collided, the light of the divine seal rose and imprisoned the phoenix origin. The phoenix origin was sealed, and the divine power spread to every inch of Tianqi's meridians. The blazing divine fire of the sun burned Tianqi's body and stimulated the unknown potential deep in his blood. Flames rose around the two of them, and the shocking power could be felt clearly from millions of miles away. The rising sun dragon god was an absolute master whose name shook the god world. Even the top forces of the god world did not dare to underestimate him. His every move was watched by the world. It's the rising sun dragon god. In the distance, the masters of the god world felt it and looked at Sunrise Divine Palace with serious expressions. This strange aura should be the rising sun dragon god's Tianqi. Who could have asked the rising sun dragon god to come personally? The last time the rising sun dragon god had done Tianqi was in the ancient times. That person was the rising sun dragon god's sister, the moon goddess. The rising sun dragon god, who had not shown his power for tens of thousands of years, had condescended to do Tianqi again today. It was unbelievable. Go and find out who the rising sun dragon god is doing Tianqi for. The authoritative figures of the various forces gave their orders. Yes. After a few breaths, streams of light streaked across the sky from all over the god world and rushed toward Sunrise Divine Palace. In the northern border of the god world, an exquisite and ancient palace stood on the northern land. In the palace, 9 beautiful women stood quietly. Their auras were unusually powerful, and each of them was above the sovereign plane of the human world. The 9 of them were very noble, and each of them was a famous master in the god world. They had not shown themselves for tens of thousands of years and were already legendary figures in the god world. However, there was another almost mythical existence above the 9 of them, the Empress. On this day, at the highest point of the palace, behind a curtain, a lazy and charming voice came out, giving the first order in tens of thousands of years. Yun Mani, go to Sunrise Divine Palace and find a chance to capture the phoenix. Below, a woman in an emerald green dress walked out from the 9 heavenly girls and respectfully accepted the order. While the various forces were making their moves, in front of the central palace of the Rising Sun Divine Palace, the heaven revelation of knowing destiny had reached a critical moment. Around the 2 of them, waves of fire surged. Their world-shocking might shook the 9 heavens and shocked all the deities. It was incomparably difficult for mortals to achieve heaven awakening. Unlike the original inhabitants of the god realm, the potential within a mortal's body was hidden deeper and harder to stimulate. Over the countless years, there had been quite a few martial artists who had ascended to the god realm. However, most of the human martial artists who had ascended to the god realm had already exhausted their potential. There were very few who could become overlords in the god realm. Sometimes, the heavenly Tao was not absolutely fair. Some people were born as gods and possessed astonishing battle prowess. However, most people could only bitterly cultivate until their lifespan was exhausted, unwilling to die. The sun god fire went through Ning Chen's meridians over and over again, stimulating the power hidden deep in his bloodline. However, as time passed, there was still no movement in Ning Chen's body. Not far away, Moon God looked at the 2 people in the flames. She was getting more and more nervous. It had been almost a day and a night. The heaven awakening of the people of the god realm never lasted more than a day and night. Once it exceeded this time, it meant that the heaven awakening had failed. There was not much time left. Could it be that the high priest's potential really could not be stimulated? Inside the sun god fire, even though time was almost up, the rising sun god was still seriously trying to achieve heaven awakening. He had already promised Moon God that he would help. He would not slack off until the last moment. In front of him, Ning Chen sat cross-legged. He emptied his divine sense and endured the pain of the sun god fire burning his body. In the east, the sun shone on the earth. The moon set and the sun rose. A day and a night was about to pass. Not far away, Moon God sighed heavily. Had he still failed? The failure of the heaven awakening was the worst possible outcome for the high priest. In front of the central sacred palace, the sun shone on the 2 people. It symbolized that their last hope was about to be extinguished. The rising sun god stopped and turned to walk toward the palace behind him. "Brother!" In front of the palace, Moon God opened her mouth. Just as she was about to say something, her expression changed. In front of the central sacred palace, heaven and earth shook. An unprecedented chill spread rapidly. It was cold and powerful. The sun god fire that filled the sky quickly dimmed. It was suppressed by this shocking chill that appeared out of nowhere. The rising sun god felt it. He looked back at the young man behind him and narrowed his golden eyes. Heaven awakening. Had he succeeded? Under the first light of dawn, wind and snow swept through the central sacred palace. Endless chill surged. Its terrifying power covered the sun god fire. In the wind and snow, Ji Ming slowly rose. His white hair was wild. He looked like a god or a demon. Success! Below, Moon God came to her senses. She was overjoyed. She could feel the power pouring out of the high priest. It was so powerful. After a full hour, the wind and snow above the central sacred palace gradually stopped. The endless chill also disappeared. Ning Chen descended from the sky. He looked at the master of the sacred palace in front of him and bowed respectfully. Thank you, sea god. No need. The rising sun god replied faintly. If you want to thank someone, thank moon god. If she hadn't asked, I wouldn't have done it. No matter what, I have to thank sea god for the success of my heaven awakening, Ningchen said seriously. The rising sun god didn't say anything. He turned and walked toward the sacred palace. Moon god stepped forward. She didn't hide the joy in her eyes. She smiled and said, Brother has always been like this. You don't have to take it to heart. High priest, congratulations on your heaven awakening. Ji Ming will never forget moon god's kindness. If I have the chance, I will repay you. Ningchen looked at the woman in front of him and said seriously. Moon god chuckled. It's nothing. High priest has protected the moon-worshipping clan for nearly 1,000 years. I should be the one thanking you. Moon god glanced at the central sacred palace and said softly, Let's leave first. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble if brother is unhappy. Ningchen nodded and followed the woman. In front of the sacred palace, the two stopped. They looked at the vast divine world in silence. After a long time, Moon God said gently, High priest, I know you didn't come to the divine world on purpose. But since you're here, you should take things as they come. The divine world and the human realm have their own scenery. You've done enough for the human realm. Now, it's time to live for yourself. Ningchen looked forward and nodded. When I find Xan Yu's soul, I won't fight for it. The moon goddess nodded and said, This is not an easy matter. We need to think about it at length. Now that the phoenix body has been reborn, both its foundation and cultivation have improved. After the main body's heavenly awakening, its foundation has been reforged. It is only a matter of time before it recovers its former cultivation. However, I have yet to think of a way to repair the demon body. My understanding of demons is not as good as my elder brother's. No need. Ningchen shook his head and said, I know how to repair the devil body. Moon God, are there any devils in the divine world? There are. Moon God nodded and said seriously, Not long ago, a devil appeared in the territory of the Rising Sun Divine Palace. The divine world is the same as the human realm. The existence of devils is not tolerated by the human realm. So, even if a devil appears, it's hard to find its whereabouts. Ningchen's eyes flashed. If that was the case, it wouldn't be easy to find the devil body in the divine world. Oh right, I haven't asked High Priest, what kind of power did you awaken in the divine world? Moon God asked curiously. Just now, the cold air had even managed to suppress his elder brother's sun god fire for a short period of time. Although people of the heavenly awakening era would have the protection of the heavenly Tao at the moment of the heavenly awakening and their power would temporarily increase, there was a limit to this increase. For someone like the High Priest, whose awakened power could actually suppress his elder brother's sun god fire, it was truly extraordinary. It's just a normal cold air. Nothing special. Ningchen raised his hand and cold air spread out. The space in front of him was frozen. Seeing this, the moon goddess frowned slightly. Was this just normal cold air? Strange. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.